Chapter 105. A full moon shone on the silent desert. As far as the eye could see, there were only undulating sand dunes and boundless emptiness. There wasn't even a blade of grass, let alone people. Aman stood there with his hands behind his back and asked with a frown, "Did you hear anything?" Medanzo also frowned and listened attentively for a while before replying. There was a rustling sound and a slight buzzing, as if something hard was rubbing against the sand. But I couldn't tell where it was coming from. What did you hear? Aman waved his hand and took out a staff out of thin air. There were 7 parangons inlaid in a spiral shape on the body of the staff. It was the one he got from Abam Wellington. He handed it to Medanzo and said, "Take it, this staff is yours. Use detection magic to check the situation." Medanzo took it and said with surprise and joy, "Hey, isn't this the same as Link's staff?" "My Ammonius, you are so generous." Aman smiled bitterly, "Don't be too happy too early. Take the staff and prepare for battle. Don't you know the situation?" With this staff in hand, the power of detection magic multiplied by several times. He then exclaimed, "Not good, these sounds are coming from under the sand dunes. Countless scorpions are approaching from all directions. We are surrounded." As he spoke, Aman suddenly thrust the iron staff in his hand deep into the sand. A wave of impact rippled out and penetrated deep into the ground. He then shouted, "Medanzo, it's up to you now." Suddenly, countless black spots appeared on the pale white sand dunes around them. Looking down from the sky, the place where Aman and Medanzo stood became a white island in the black tide. That was the result of Aman's staff striking the ground and forcing all the scorpions to retreat from the ground. These scorpions were nearly a foot long. They raised their pincers and raised their venomous tails. They looked extremely terrifying. If it was just 1 or 2 scorpions, he might be able to stomp them to death with just a lift of his foot. Even if he was accidentally stabbed by the poisonous hooks, it wouldn't be fatal. However, there were thousands of poisonous scorpions. Anyone who saw them would tremble with fear. However, Medanzo showed no fear. He shouted loudly and waved the staff in his hand. A whirlwind rose and swirled the sand into a spiraling storm, sweeping out in a circle. The grains of sand that were blown up by the wind were like tiny needles, and there were countless wind blades that were hard to distinguish between the needles. The hard shells of the poisonous scorpions were shattered by the sand, and their bodies and chelicerae were cut off by the wind blades, leaving behind a ground full of corpses. Some scorpions had been cut in half, but their broken bodies were still struggling and twisting. This large-scale offensive air element divine spell was very powerful, but the desert scorpions did not retreat because of the death of their companion. The scorpions behind them stepped over the corpses on the ground and surged forward. Aman did not attack. He only said one thing, "These scorpions are very big and their shells are very hard. It's too much effort to use air element magic." Medanzo then raised his staff and a bright flame appeared in the whirlwind. The flame instantly turned into a dancing fire dragon that circled between the sand dunes. The scorpions' remains were the first to be ignited. Then the scorpions that surged forward also twisted and rolled in the sea of fire, and were burnt to ashes. Faint smoke rose in all directions, mixed with an unpleasant stench. Aman spoke again, "Scorpions have venom in their bodies. With so much venom around us, the smoke will be very poisonous." There was no need for Aman to remind him. Medanzo did not stop the whirlwind while casting sea of fire. Instead, he blew the smoke outwards. These scorpions seemed to be very resistant to fire. Many of them were still struggling to crawl closer with flames and smoke, but were cut into pieces by the wind blades not far away. At this moment, Medanzo was casting 2 kinds of large-scale advanced-level magic at the same time. He couldn't go on like this. After a while, he shouted, "God Aman, are we in a scorpion nest? There's no need to waste time like this. Why should we be surrounded by a group of scorpions? Let's just go. The scorpions can't catch up with us." Aman pulled out his staff and put away the tent. He nodded and said, "Then let's go. You break out." Medanzo pointed his staff forward and the whirlwind converged into a straight line and shot out, blowing a wide trench in the sand. The scorpions were swept to the sides. The flames disappeared, and then turned into a cold. The scorpions nearby were stiff on the ground, and the scorpions a little further away seemed to be affected by the cold and slowed down. Medanzo took the opportunity to stride forward, and Amon followed behind with his leather bag. Casting water magic in the dry desert was strenuous and unrewarding, but when used with wind shuttle and freeze, the cold was a good way to deal with these scorpions. It might not be able to freeze them to death, but as long as they could stop them from moving forward, they could break out of the encirclement. The two walked unhurriedly among the scorpions. Medanzo pointed his staff forward and opened a path. When the sky was getting brighter, there were fewer scorpions around them. There were still endless white dunes around them. Medanzo finally breathed a sigh of relief and turned to Amon. How come there are so many scorpions? Have you encountered them before? Amon shook his head. There are scorpions in the desert, and there have been people who were accidentally bitten to death. I've heard of it since I was a child, but I've never heard of so many scorpions. Maybe the environment changed after the flood. Medanzo frowned. These scorpions are obviously too big, and they look very poisonous. They are not ordinary sand scorpions, are they? While speaking, he suddenly stamped his foot and killed a scorpion that suddenly burrowed out of the sand. He cursed, "Why are there more? Is there no end to them?" Amon suddenly thought of something and said, "Before coming here, I heard that there are monsters in this area. It seems that these scorpions are also one of the monsters. I once saw a scroll of myths and legends in the Temple of Isis, called the Land of Marduk. It recorded that the town of Duk was once the battlefield of the gods. A long time ago, the gods created 9 kinds of monsters to help them in the battle, namely, 9-headed serpent, scorpion, sea monster, giant lion, 3-headed hound, human-faced scorpion, mermaid, and wild bull." 9-headed serpent? Asked Medanzo. Isn't that Humbaba, the god of the Euphrates River? It is said that he was the gatekeeper of Enlil's realm. He was killed by Gilgamesh and Enkidu not long ago. Amon nodded. The 9-headed serpent is probably Humbaba. He must have been subdued by Enlil in that great battle and became the gatekeeper of the divine realm. Although Humbaba is dead, he still has many descendants. I've met them in the Euphrates River. If Humbaba has descendants, then other monsters might have. The human-faced scorpion is one of the 9 monsters. The scorpions we met may be its descendants. Medanzo stuck out his tongue. Then we have to be careful. Maybe we will run into some poisonous insects or beasts. Amon nodded again. Yes. If we run into them, don't get entangled with them. We should avoid them as much as possible. We're not here to destroy the monsters. We can't do that with just the 2 of us. We're just here to check out the situation here and get to Duk as soon as possible. As they continued to move forward, the 2 of them slowed down. There were always poisonous scorpions appearing in this desert. They would suddenly drill out of the sand, sometimes in groups, sometimes only 5 or 6 of them. Almost every day, they had to fight several battles, big or small. Medanzo was almost stung by a scorpion. Amon just followed behind and did not do anything. He let Medanzo deal with everything. 7 or 8 days later, they could see sparse grass in the desert. "Medanzo, can you hold on?" asked Amon. Metatro took a few breaths and said, "Ever since I started practicing magic, the number of magic I've used in the past few days is less than the number of magic I've used. The opponent is just a scorpion, but it can't be sustained. Who knows when it will appear? If it weren't for you, Ammonius, I'm afraid I wouldn't have been able to hold on much longer." On the same day that Amon and Medanzo decided to turn north from the trade route, 3 people were having a meeting in the shrine of Saya Enlil. They were an old man and his 2 young disciples. Goliath's appearance had not changed much. He still had a goatee and a face full of wrinkles, but his eyes seemed to be clearer and deeper than 2 years ago. He asked Raphael, "Have you been practicing magic all this time?" Raphael replied, "Magic practice has been my hobby since I was a child. and I'm used to it. 2 years ago, Master sent me to Duk to explore the terrain. Because of an accident, I stopped practicing magic for a while, but since then, I have never stopped practicing. Goliath asked, half a year ago, I sent you to Charcoal Marsh to investigate the monsters there. It was much more dangerous than the mission 2 years ago. Did you stop practicing magic? Raphael replied respectfully, yes, under your guidance, it has become a kind of self-awareness. I don't have to remind myself what to do, I do it naturally every day. Basic meditation is also a way to restore magic. Only in this way can I persist in that dangerous environment and finally complete the mission Master gave me. Goliath smiled and asked again, young man, in such a dangerous environment, do you know why you can always turn danger into safety? Raphael showed a thoughtful look, I also have questions in my heart. At that time, there were several encounters that were really dangerous, but I always got through them safely, as if I was blessed by the gods. Goliath smiled and shook his head, maybe you really got the favor of the gods, but the person who protected you at that time was Walter. I deliberately sent him to follow you secretly, but you didn't know. Raphael was taken aback. He stood up and said to Walter, so it was you who protected me, then you should have saved me several times, why didn't you tell me? Walter smiled slightly, Master didn't let me tell you at that time. Raphael knelt down and saluted, even if you didn't tell me at that time, it has been half a year since I completed the mission, and you haven't mentioned it for so long. You have secretly saved me so many times, but I have never expressed my gratitude. Walter still smiled, this is what I should do, and it is what I am willing to do. If Master didn't let me say it, then I wouldn't say it. Since Master has said it today, then I will say it. I am only completing the mission, and I don't ask for any gratitude. Of course, at this moment, I also accept your gratitude. Get up, my brother. He pulled Raphael up. Goliath looked at Walter again and said, this state of mind is very good. For the past 6 months, I deliberately did not tell you, Raphael, and you yourself did not take it to heart. Walter, have you ever thought about when you will become a supreme mage? I have taught many students in the Hittite kingdom, but the one who is most likely to become the first supreme mage is you. The 6th level mage Walter replied humbly, it is not a matter of whether I want to or not. I am afraid that all the mages on the continent want to take this step, but it is not a wish that comes out of thin air. When faced with this goal, I can only decide what I will do and not think too much about it. Goliath nodded with satisfaction, very good, I hope you mean what you say and can really do it. This time, I will send the 2 of you to carry out another mission. Set off together across the Saya Desert, and then go to the city of Uruk in Babylon and the Cape States in Igut respectively. Send a secret letter to the 2 governors, Gilgamesh and Rod-Dik respectively. Come back when you get an answer, no matter what it is. The 9th level Supreme Mage took out 2 sealed leather cylinders and handed them to his students, you are not allowed to open them yourselves. The contents of the letter may also bring you trouble. If there is any trouble, try to solve it on your own and bring the reply to me. It may be a little troublesome to cross the Saya Desert now. Try not to fight the powerful monsters and make sure you pass safely. Here are a few scrolls and a flying instrument. If your life is in danger, Walter, use it to escape with Raphael. But this is also a trial. Do not use the scrolls or the flying instrument until the last moment. Amon and Madanzo had walked to the edge of the desert. From time to time, they could see low, cold-resistant grass growing on the sand dunes. Counting the distance, they would reach the inland lake in another day. This kind of grassy sand dunes was also the most suitable environment for scorpions to grow. Madanzo involuntarily raised his vigilance, but after walking for a long time, he did not see any scorpions. He could not help but sigh, it's really strange today. Why haven't I seen a single scorpion? Amon laughed, haven't you been annoyed by the scorpions these days? Do you want to meet a group of scorpions? Metatro, who looked tired, also laughed. That's not what I mean. I can't wait to relax. We've been on tenterhooks until now, but there's no movement at the place where we're most likely to encounter scorpions. It's better to have a good fight and get out of here quickly. Amon said, the most dangerous enemy is the invisible enemy. This feeling is really torturous. But you have to be mentally prepared. Even if we get out of the desert and get rid of the scorpions, there may be something waiting in front of us, maybe even more difficult to deal with than the scorpions. Huh? There are marks on the sand over there. What are they? There were very strange marks on the sand dunes in front of them. They looked like frozen ripples on the surface of the water. Madanzo walked closer and bent down to observe. He took a deep breath and said, I can't be more familiar with these marks. They are the footprints of scorpions crawling through the sand. But these scorpions are too big. Each of them is probably more than 3 feet long. It seems they are heading in the same direction. What happened? Let's take this opportunity to get out of here. Amon waved his hand, don't worry. Let me see what those scorpions are doing. It'll be safer if we can figure it out. He took out a magic artifact embedded in a golden base. It was the soul-chasing lamp he got from Vitru's relic. He stood in front of the marks and gently waved his staff. The magic artifact embedded in the wick of the lamp emitted a circular halo of light. The scene in the halo was constantly changing, as if it was following the scorpion's footprints on the sand dunes. After crossing countless sand dunes, the scene in front of them was already dozens of miles away. Amon and Madanzo saw a group of giant scorpions. Each scorpion was more than 3 feet long from pincers to tail. Their shells were black and shiny like hard armor. From time to time, the tip of their hooked tails would shoot out pale blue flames. They were terrifying giant scorpions. The flames shot out from their hooked tails were in a straight line and could attack targets from very far away. Not only was the scorpion poisonous, but it was also accompanied by a high temperature. Even a little bit of it could be fatal. These scorpions didn't always shoot their venom. Instead, they lined up in a formation similar to a military formation. They protected each other and attacked each other, waiting for the right opportunity to strike. The flames they shot out were only long-range attacks. The most threatening weapons were their thick pincers and hooked tails. There were hundreds of scorpions, and all of them were giant scorpions. It was a terrifying sight to behold. In the middle of the scorpions were 2 young men. They were waving their staffs. Obviously, they were both mages. Their magic power was profound, and their skills were extraordinary. They were able to cast all kinds of large-scale defensive and offensive magic. The older mage was in charge of the attack, while the younger one was in charge of the defense. They tried to break through the encirclement, but in the end, they were unable to do so. Around them were the bodies of nearly 100 giant scorpions. Some were scorched, some were cut into pieces, some were frozen, and some were exploded by a tremendous force. It was hard to tell how many kinds of magic the 2 mages had used. Amon shook the staff in his hand lightly, and the light of the lamp expanded rapidly. What he focused on was the corpses of the giant scorpions. 2 days ago, he and Metatro had also encountered a scorpion. Naturally, he knew the effects of various kinds of magic attacks. If the scorpion was burned by the high temperature of the fire element magic, it would turn into ashes, leaving behind a hard shell that would crack at the slightest touch. But looking at the scorpions that had been burned, their pincers and stingers were intact, shining in the sand and ashes. The effect of fire magic attacks was not very good, and it would ignite poisonous smoke. The 2 mages changed their methods after trying it out. The scorpion corpses that were left behind were destroyed with other magic. Whether it was spatial slash or wind blade, the scorpion corpses should have been torn apart. But Amon found that there was a palm-sized hard carapace on the back of the giant scorpions that was intact. One could imagine how hard it was. The pincers, stingers, and carapace of these giant scorpions were all good materials for processing weapons or magic artifacts. What's more, there were so many of them. As the successor of Nietzsche, Amon immediately thought of them. Chapter 106. Judging from the magic they used, the older one was a 6th-level mage and the younger one was a 5th-level mage. Their skills were not simple. They were definitely not ordinary mages. Even Amon admired them. He had never seen an advanced mage who could use various kinds of magic so perfectly. If it had been another two mages of the same level, they would have been killed by the scorpion's tail. But these two did not show any signs of defeat. They were just struggling. It seemed that it would not be easy to break out of the encirclement. Amon frowned and said, "A 5th-level mage and a 6th-level mage. They are definitely the disciples of the best mages. In terms of magic alone, they are not inferior to you or me. If you and I join, the four of us can definitely deal with these giant scorpions. Why not help them along the way? We can also make friends. It's rare to meet a mage like this." Madanzo waved his staff and said, "Well, let's do it. We've been annoyed by the scorpions these days. We want to vent our anger when we meet these big guys." Amon waved his hand and took out a long sword and a short shield. He said, "Put away your staff. You will pretend to be an advanced warrior who has undergone the second awakening of his power. I will pretend to be a 6th-level mage. We practice the power of two sides. It's not suitable to be used in public. Make friends with these two masters and collect some materials. We can take them to Link's tribe to make a batch of tools." Warret and Raphael were engaged in a bitter struggle with the mutated giant scorpions. Several times they tried to break out of the encirclement, but the mutated giant scorpions always found the right time to spray burning venom, slowing them down. Such a battle was the most helpless for a mage because the scorpions would not negotiate with them. Even if they killed many scorpions, there would still be more coming. Walter had scrolls with him that could instantly break out of the encirclement with Raphael, but he had not used them. He also knew that Raphael had scrolls with him. Goliath had specially taught them to protect themselves before leaving, and Raphael had insisted on not using them. He only cooperated with Walter to fight the giant scorpions with his own power. Teacher Goliath had said that going through this path was also a test and experience. Raphael rarely had this kind of experience. The young man did not know that he was on the verge of breaking through from the 5th level to the 6th level. Raphael was the nephew of the Prime Minister of the Hittite Kingdom. Even without his family background, he was Goliath's favorite student. Most people would respect him and give in. It was rare to see such a scene. But these scorpions did not care who he was. Goliath had sent Raphael to carry out difficult and dangerous tasks twice in order to create an environment for him to gain experience. As long as he did not flinch, Warret would cooperate and protect him. He would not resort to other means until the last moment. Hundreds of giant scorpions had been killed, but there were still nearly 300 scorpions left. It seemed that it was impossible to break out of the encirclement like this. Walter sighed inwardly. He had already prepared 2 supreme scrolls and could use them at any time. At this moment, Walter was suddenly startled. He sensed a powerful force erupting behind a distant dune. He immediately held the scrolls and shouted, "Raphael, be careful. Another master is coming." "Is it a bigger scorpion?" Of course it was not a scorpion. Then they heard a violent explosion. At the edge of the encirclement, 5 or 6 giant scorpions seemed to be torn to pieces by a force of spatial distortion. Their carapaces and body fragments splashed in all directions. Raphael whispered, "It's a helper, at least a 6th-level mage." Then he shouted, "May I ask which friend has come?" "Walter and Raphael, the High Priest of Saya, thank you for your help." A loud voice answered from behind the dune, "Wandering warrior Madanzo and mage Alaha are passing by and have come to lend a hand." Following the voice, a warrior had already crossed the sand dune and was approaching with large strides. He held a short shield in his left hand to protect himself, and with his right hand, he waved his sword and chopped a few scorpions that were surging towards him into pieces. The giant scorpions also realized that they had encountered a master of close combat. They actually had a little intelligence and knew how to fight together. The scorpions nearby retreated, but several scorpions in the distance shot out poisonous flames in a crisscrossed manner. Madanzo raised his shield and spun the tip of his sword in the air. A spiral of air rose and slightly changed the direction of the poisonous flames, trying to block them with the shield. Walter shouted again, "Warrior, the poisonous flames can corrode armor and weapons. Be careful of your shield." Before his voice died away, the poisonous flames scattered in front of the shield. Sand and dust rose and floated in the air like pale yellow clouds, wrapping around the poisonous flames and then exploding. Another man appeared on the dune behind Madanzo, holding a staff in his right hand and a ventosculum in his left. It was Amon. Since he had asked Madanzo to give him an alias, he did not want to appear with his original identity. He took out another staff in his hand. Although it was also very good, it was far inferior to the iron staff. It was the most common way of fighting for a mage to have a warrior in the front while he cast magic to support the attack from behind. Madanzo strode into the swarm of scorpions and cut open a path. Amon followed behind, collecting the stinger, pincers, and the strange carapace scattered on the sand. The swarm of scorpions split into two groups, trying to surround them separately. However, Metatro took the lead with his sword and was unstoppable. The four of them quickly converged. Walter and Raphael said in unison, "Thank you so much for coming to our rescue in such a dangerous place." This gratitude came from the bottom of their hearts. Although they had the means to protect themselves, the price was not small. It was best not to use them. Moreover, in this barren desert, instead of avoiding a large group of mutant scorpions, they rushed in to save them. This was an admirable behavior in any case. Madanzo said with a slightly proud expression, "It is fate that we met. It is best for me to make friends with all kinds of heroes when I travel the continent. You two are young but have extraordinary achievements. You dare to walk in this desert. It is only right for you to help." Amon waved his staff and said, "Let's not talk nonsense. Let's talk after we deal with these scorpions." The four of them joined together to form a small battle formation, which immediately increased their power. Madanzo was at the forefront, waving his sword and slashing. Amon and Walter walked 2 steps behind, side by side, protecting Madanzo with magic, while Raphael walked at the rear. The giant scorpions moved very fast, crawling quickly with their footsteps, always in a state of encirclement. The four of them were not afraid at all. They crossed several sand dunes and killed nearly 100 giant scorpions. Madanzo was exhausted, while Amon took a break and collected a lot of materials. Seeing that the scorpions were difficult to deal with, Walter was about to ask Madanzo to retreat and rest for a while. Unexpectedly, these scorpions also seemed to understand the situation. Feeling that the few of them could not deal with them, they suddenly scattered and disappeared into the sand. Madanzo lowered his sword and gasped, "Huh, why did they all run?" Amon muttered, "These giant scorpions are different from ordinary scorpions. They know how to cooperate and have a bit of intelligence. When they realized that they could not deal with the four of us, they retreated. It's a bit like a marching army." Walter nodded, "I also realized that these giant scorpions are different from ordinary poisonous insects. It seems that they have undergone simple training. That's why they are more terrifying. Otherwise, we would have broken out a long time ago. Thank you two heroes for saving us. I haven't had a chance to ask for your advice." Raphael and Madanzo were almost exhausted. They sat on the sand dune to rest, always on guard. Amon called himself Allaha. He was a mage from the Empire of Igut and loved to work with all kinds of magic artifacts. He came here mainly to train himself and collect materials, which explained his actions just now. Madanzo called himself a warrior from the kingdom of Babylon. He was once rescued by Allaha in the mountains, and the two became good friends. He liked adventure and longed for the legendary heroic deeds. Coming to this desolate place to kill monsters was not only to help his friends, but also to train himself. There was no need to hide his identity, and what he said was almost the truth. But the origin of Raphael and Walter surprised Amon. When he heard that they were high priests of the Saya Shrine, Amon was very surprised. High priests of the Saya Shrine were one of the noblest people in the Saya Shrine. When Aman was in Duk, he could hardly imagine that he would have dealings with such important people. What was even more surprising was that the two high priests did not bring any attendants or guards with them. Even ordinary mages would not do such a thing on foot in the Saya desert. These two noble lords claimed to be carrying out the orders of their teacher. They had gone to Uruk and Cape States to deliver letters. Their teacher was the 9th level supreme mage Goliath. Aman had seen Goliath before. One night, he saw Goliath quarreling in Crazy Ole's house. Later, Goliath and Crazy Ole went to Mayor Dusty's house and flew away from the window. Later, he learned that the man was the chief priest of Saya, the 8th level supreme mage Goliath. The next day, Mayor Dusty found an excuse to send Aman to Duk to avoid the disaster that followed. Crazy Ole also mentioned Goliath in his message. He told Aman that if he encountered any trouble in the Saya, he could go to Goliath for help. This supreme mage was trustworthy. At least he would not harm Aman. Not many people could receive such praise from Crazy Ole. Aman did not expect to meet Goliath's students in the desert today. Indeed, a great teacher produces a great disciple. Goliath himself had advanced to the 9th level, becoming the top existence on the continent. Aman did not tell Walter and Raphael about his origins. He had nothing to ask Goliath for help at the moment. They chatted for a while. Aman also made a delicious lunch and invited everyone to enjoy it together. Raphael warmly invited Aman and Madanzo to visit Saya if they had the opportunity. He would definitely thank them well. Walter saw that everyone had rested enough. He got up and said, "Lord Allah, you must be very rich to have such a spatial artifact. You are also an artifact maker. You must have all kinds of artifacts. But please accept this scroll. It's a token of my appreciation. It might come in handy when you're exploring the desert." Walter took out an intermediate scroll, Spatial Shackles, which Aman was very familiar with. He had used 2 scrolls himself. It was indeed a very practical auxiliary means of escape in dangerous situations. Aman could not refuse and had to accept the gift. Walter cautiously said, "Be careful in the desert. Don't get entangled with powerful poisonous insects and beasts. No matter how precious the materials are, they are not as valuable as your own life. The giant scorpions have retreated. Maybe they will summon more powerful monsters to attack us. We can't stay here for long. Let's go. Welcome to Saya." Aman's reaction was beyond everyone's expectation. He suddenly stood up and took out his iron staff out of thin air. He embedded the ventusum into the staff in a blur. He said in a deep voice, "I'm afraid it's too late. Everyone, be careful. There are powerful enemies nearby." Walter was shocked. He was already a 6th level mage, and his reaction and experience were far superior to his peers. He did not expect that Aman's reaction was even sharper than his. Moreover, he took out such a magical staff. It meant that Aman did not use his full strength in the battle just now. Madanzo and Raphael had already jumped up from the ground with their weapons and staffs in their hands. Lead immediately sensed a strong sense of danger and turned to look in the same direction as Aman. A strange scene appeared not far away. 3 sand dunes slowly rose up in front of them. The sand at the top kept leaking, and the sand at the bottom kept gushing out. The sand dunes rose higher and higher until they turned into the shape of a human. When the sand dunes stopped rising and all the sand fell, 3 monsters appeared in front of them. The one in the middle was a man, more than 20 feet tall. His upper body was in the shape of a human, but his hands had turned into a pair of huge pincers, and his lower body was in the shape of a scorpion. He stood on the sand dunes with 6 feet, and his tail was 30 feet long. At the end of the tail was a huge curved hook that looked like a spear. The monster's humanoid upper body was extremely muscular, and there were flame-shaped patterns on his cheeks. His eyes were completely dark brown, and there were no whites in them at all. He looked down at the 4 of them coldly. Walter gasped and subconsciously murmured to himself, "The legendary Scorpion King, the human-faced scorpion created by the gods." Aman said in a deep voice, "Don't panic. It's not impossible to fight 4 against 1. As he spoke, he not only took out his iron staff, but also 3 scrolls out of thin air in his right hand. He told the others not to panic, but he himself was not as calm as usual. He even said something wrong. Because they weren't fighting 4 against 1, they were facing 3 powerful enemies. Chapter 107. Strange vows. The 2 naked women with scorpion tails were holding staffs in their hands, made of an unknown animal's long bone. The one on the left had a flame spirit at the top of her bone staff, and the one on the right had a aquaticore at the top of her bone staff. Are there mages among the monsters too? The giant man in the middle, with the upper body of a human and the lower body of a scorpion, should be the legendary Scorpion King Gilgamesh, a monster created by the fallen ancient gods, and had the same origin as Humbaba. Unfortunately, and the others were not Gilgamesh and Enkidu, so it was almost impossible to kill Gilgamesh. Raphael quietly said to Walter through message magic, "The Scorpion King cannot be defeated. Throw away the scrolls, take out the flying shuttle and escape." Walter quietly replied, "My flying shuttle can only take 2 people. They just risked their lives to save me, I can't just leave them behind." Goliath gave Walter a flying artifact, which could allow him to quickly escape with Raphael in a moment of crisis. He also gave him 3 flying scrolls to help him activate the flying shuttle. But with Walter's ability, he could only use the flying shuttle for himself and Raphael. The 2 high priests were loyal and did not run away immediately. Raphael quietly said, "At least the Scorpion King can talk. It's not that we can't negotiate, but it's best not to fight." They were whispering here, and Madanzo could not hear them. But unexpectedly, the Scorpion King Gilgamesh heard them and suddenly said, "Despicable humans, there are such idiots. What are you 2 talking about? You think you can escape, but you don't. Then try it." His voice was low and hoarse, like something hard rubbing against each other, with the echo of metal colliding. Only Metatro did not know how powerful he was. With one by his side, Metatro had always been very bold. He waved his sword and was about to form a battle formation in the front like he did just now, but unexpectedly, he was pulled behind by one. Took a few steps forward and stood in front of the crowd. His voice was very calm, and without a trace of trembling, he asked, "Are you the legendary human-faced Scorpion King?" The Scorpion King nodded his huge head, "Yes, I am Gilgamesh, and they are the Fire Scorpion and the Ice Scorpion. Despicable humans, you do not beg for mercy when facing me, but want to make a last-ditch struggle?" When he spoke, his eyes that had no whites flashed, and even the Scorpion King's wrath showed a trace of fear. Metatro and the rest did not see this, but had already taken out a gray scroll and held it in front of him. He held it in his hand and replied, "What's the use of begging? May I ask the great Scorpion King, it is said that you possess the power of the gods, why do you appear in front of lowly mortals?" The Scorpion King snorted coldly, "Despicable human, you actually dare to ask me? You clearly know that they are my people, but you still killed so many. Do you think your life is more noble than the scorpions?" Shook his head, "I don't think my life is more noble than the scorpions, but I also don't think the scorpions are more noble than me. But your Majesty Scorpion King, you call me a despicable human, so you must think that you are more noble than all of us?" Shook his head, "I don't think that my life is more noble than the scorpions, but I also don't think that the scorpions are more noble than me. But your Majesty Scorpion King, you call me a despicable human, so you must think that you are more noble than all of us?" As he spoke, he gently twirled Storm's wrath with his fingers, as though he was ready to open it at any time, as though giving a silent warning, "Since you are such a noble human-faced Scorpion King, then there is no need to perish together with the lowly humans." The Scorpion King suddenly laughed. His laughter was like the buzzing sound of sand rubbing together, almost enough to make people dizzy. He sneered and said, "What a bold person. You actually didn't kneel and pray when you saw me. I admire your courage, so I have decided to give you a chance. 2 of you must pay for the lives of my people, and I will let the other 2 go. You choose who will die." The Scorpion King had sharp ears and eyes. He had already discovered that Walter and Raphael were not in cahoots with Ah. It was the two mages who had clashed with the giant scorpions, resulting in the battle just now. He did not want to become enemies with Ah's wrath, but he made such a request. The Scorpion King's request was an order, and his cold tone did not allow for any discussion. Behind him, Walter and Raphael looked at each other and made a decision with their eyes. If Ah chose the two of them, they would immediately use their flying artifacts to escape. Madanzo whispered from behind, "Ah, don't be fooled, this Scorpion King is very cunning. He wants to break up our alliance and win without a fight." Ah shook his head and said, "I have no right to choose who will die. Whether it is a human or a scorpion, it is a choice made by oneself. We did not actively harm any of the scorpions. We were just constantly attacked by the scorpions in the desert. Everything was out of self-defense, it does not matter whose life is more noble. Scorpion King, if you were me, please answer, should we kill those scorpions?" Fire Scorpion, who was on the left of the Scorpion King, finally could not help but speak. Her voice was slightly hoarse, but it carried a certain magnetism. "You have killed so many of His Majesty's people. What is so unfair about only 2 lives?" Ah shook his head and said, "We killed so many scorpions, not because we wanted to, but because we had to. The scorpions we met along the way were different from normal scorpions. Such heavy casualties can only be blamed on one person, but I'm not sure if it can be used to describe it." Fire Scorpion asked in return, "Who is to blame?" Raphael, who was behind Ah, spoke up, "Those scorpions have intelligence, it is obvious that they have been trained. However, the person who trained them used their intelligence to send them to their deaths. They know how to attack and coordinate, but the purpose of the battle is incomprehensible. Such attacks are meaningless, and will only waste their lives. Whoever drove and trained them should be responsible for their deaths." The Scorpion King's face turned ugly, while the Ice Scorpion on the right spoke up. Her voice was clear, and seemed to carry some sort of charm. "Isn't this what you humans learned? Those scorpions have gained intelligence, but they have been infected by humans, which is why they have become so terrible. As a despicable human, you should feel ashamed." Ah Lien shook his head and said, "Scorpion with a staff, you are wrong. Humans are not only despicable and terrible as you understand them to be, but also think and pursue all things beautiful. The eyes of the lowly can only see the lowliness of others. Those scorpions have gained intelligence, but they are not real humans. If you think that is unique to humans, then you are destroying the glory of humans." Walter also stepped forward and stood in front of Raphael, saying, "Your Excellency Scorpion King, please allow me to call you Your Excellency. You trained those scorpions like a battle formation, ordering them to launch meaningless attacks in the desert. Are you trying to cultivate a scorpion army in this way? My name is Walter, and my companion Raphael and I are the high priests of the Shrine of Saya Enrol. Our teacher is the chief priest of the Shrine of Saya and is also a 9th-level supreme mage. He commands the soldiers and civilians of the city, and is much stronger than your scorpion army. But we will not start a meaningless war, and let the soldiers and civilians die needlessly." Madanzo also said, "Since we are not injured today, we can forget about this matter. Your scorpions are dead, you should go back and think about it. Also, you 2 beautiful scorpions, I would like to ask, you keep saying that you despise humans, so why do you still take human form?" After the initial panic, they realized that the Scorpion King only moved its mouth instead of its hands. Ah, on the other hand, was calm and composed. The few of them also calmed down and began to reason with each other. They were all quite eloquent. The Scorpion King's face was very ugly, and the flame-like tattoos on his cheeks changed color. Without waiting for the 2 scorpions to speak, he replied in a deep voice, "This is not the appearance of a human, but the appearance of a god. Legend has it that the gods created humans in their own image. They have a godlike body, but foolish humans do not know how to cherish it." Ah said in a deep voice, "We cherish our bodies, so we do not want to be hurt by your scorpions." Scorpion King, I would like to ask you another question. Is it possible that humans created gods in their own image? Do you know how to become a god, or do you want to become a real god? If that is the case, Your Majesty Scorpion King, how about we make an agreement today? Only understood that the Scorpion King did not attack because he did not want to perish together with his enemies. Of course, he did not want to use the Doomsday Scroll, but it was not a good idea to be in a deadlock with this arrogant and powerful Scorpion King. He had to find a way for him to step down. Ah's words caused Walter and the rest to be dumbfounded. The Scorpion King's expression changed a few times, as though something was on his mind. After a long silence, he finally nodded and said, "Interesting person, what is your name, and what agreement do you wish to make with me?" Ah replied, "I am Allah. The agreement is simple. As long as your Scorpion army does not initiate an attack, me and my tribesmen will not harm your subordinates. The desert is not a suitable place for humans to live. If you wish to have your own divine realm, feel free to try. In fact, you should be glad that you met us and not Enkidu and Gilgamesh. Think about Humbaba's fate. And we should also be glad that we happened to meet Your Majesty Scorpion King, and not be surrounded by the mutated giant scorpions." Ah's words caused Walter to be secretly shocked. He also hurriedly said, "I represent Saya to make the same agreement with Your Majesty Scorpion King. Do you know that this desert is within Saya's territory?" The Scorpion King narrowed his eyes and asked, "High Priest, why don't you represent the Temple of Enlil?" Walter shook his head and said, "With my identity, I do not have that qualification. I can only represent Saya to make an agreement with you." The Scorpion King then asked Ah, "How do I know who is your tribesman?" Ah raised the iron branch in his hand and said, "This is my staff. It's very special, you should be able to recognize it. If my tribesmen pass through your territory, they will carry this staff with them." The Scorpion King thought for a moment and asked, "What if someone violates the agreement?" Ah laughed, then, "Mighty and noble Scorpion King, you can appear like a god and mete out punishment without suffering vengeance, hatred, or curses. In order to make the agreement official, we must all swear an oath." The Scorpion King let out another contemptuous sneer, "Are human oaths valid? What kind of oath do you want to make?" Ah replied unhurriedly, "Your oath is that if you violate it, you will never become a god. My oath is that if I violate it, I will forever be a lowly human." Walter and the rest behind him had strange expressions on their faces. What kind of oath was that? It was absolute nonsense, and this Scorpion King's mind was indeed different from the average human. He actually nodded and said, "The four of you must all swear the same oath. Only then will it work." Madanzo tried his best not to laugh, and pointed at the fire scorpion and the ice scorpion behind Ah, "Then the three of you must also swear the same oath. Only then will it be fair." Unexpectedly, the Scorpion King straightforwardly said, "All right, it's a deal." Walter and Raphael looked at each other, wanting to laugh but not daring to. Thus, the four of them and the three scorpion demons made their respective oaths. The Scorpion King waved his huge pincers, which turned back into human hands. His lower body also turned back into human form, looking completely like a muscular man. He pointed at Ah and the rest and said, "Please remember today's agreement and abide by your oath." Quicksand surged up and enveloped the three scorpion demons. The sand dune then calmed down, and the Scorpion King and his two subordinates were nowhere to be seen. Madanzo patted his chest and said, "Ah, Allah, you're really amazing. You sent the Scorpion King away just like that? I thought you were going to stay here today." Ah had already kept his Tiamat's wrath, holding onto the iron branch with one hand. He turned to Madanzo and said, "Quick, help me up." Madanzo quickly stepped forward to support one of Ah's arms, and asked in surprise, "What's wrong with you? Why are you covered in cold sweat?" Ah waved his hand without saying a word. Walter and Raphael stepped forward and saluted, "Sir Allah, it's all thanks to your wisdom and bravery that we were able to escape this calamity. We're also very grateful that you didn't choose to hand us over to the Scorpion King when we were threatened." Ah laughed bitterly, "I don't have the qualifications to do that. If I really did that, the one who would die would be me. Let's go, don't you still need to deliver the letter? It's better to leave this place as soon as possible. Walter nodded, we'll leave now. The two of you shouldn't stay for too long, I look forward to meeting you in Saya. He then threw out a shuttle-shaped artifact, which turned into a ship-shaped space that wrapped around himself and Raphael as they flew into the sky. In mid-air, he unfurled a flying scroll, and the shuttle suddenly sped up and disappeared into the horizon. Looked at the direction where the shuttle disappeared and said, those two are really not bad. They could have run away on their own, but they chose to stay and fight with us. Chapter 108. Ahmad replied, that's a wind-riding shuttle. The materials needed to make it are very rare. It's also very difficult to make it successfully. You can use a ventusolve to create a magical space and activate it with high-grade air magic. It can carry you in flight. It's a very precious artifact. It should be given by the supreme mage Goliath for self-defense. Medanzo blinked and asked, if we have a wind-riding shuttle like this, can you also carry me in flight? Ahmad nodded. Yes, I can also use high-grade air magic. My magic power is no weaker than Walter's. If we have a wind-riding shuttle, of course we can carry you in flight. Medanzo's face was full of yearning. How much does one cost? Is there a place to sell it? Ahmad smiled bitterly. I've never heard of anyone willing to sell this kind of thing. Only a great shrine with a strong foundation can own it. If you can collect enough materials, you can try to make it yourself. Medanzo leaned closer and asked, Ahmad, do you know how to make it? I don't mind dragging Link with me to collect all kinds of materials. How much does it cost to make such a shuttle? Ahmad glanced at him and answered unhurriedly, you need a ventusolve as the core of the artifact. It's worth 500 parangons, and you may not be able to buy it. I have a ventusolve, but it's already been made into a spatial artifact. I can't use it to make a wind-riding shuttle. Even if you can collect all the materials, including the ventusolve, and understand the method of making an artifact, there's no guarantee of success. Even an outstanding artifact master has a chance of failure. Calculate the cost yourself. Medanzo didn't reply for a long time. Ahmad continued, if you really want to, wait until we reach Link's tribe. I will teach you the blueprints of several kinds of artifacts and the method of making them. Whether you can collect the materials and successfully make it all depends on you. Link is better at making artifacts than you are. You can ask him for help. Even if you can't make a wind-riding shuttle, you can make something else. Medanzo was excited again. In my mind, you have always been an omniscient and omnipotent god. One waved his staff and said, don't just praise me. Have you rested enough? We should also leave this place quickly. Medanzo, who was fatigued for the past few days, once again made his way through the desert. The Scorpion King seemed to have kept his word, and they did not encounter any more attacks from the scorpions. This encounter made Medanzo very excited, and he couldn't help but mention it. On the way, he said to Walter and Raphael didn't run away at the first opportunity, but it might not be entirely because of loyalty. With the capabilities of the Scorpion King, they might not have been able to escape on the wind shuttle at the first opportunity. Thought for a moment, then shook his head and replied, it's indeed difficult to escape, but when you start the shuttle, you can use an intermediate magic scroll called Dimensional Confinement as a cover. They probably have this kind of scroll in their hands. The Scorpion King might be able to stop it with all his might, but it's not worth it if the price is too high. As they walked, Medanzo suddenly said to himself, so interesting, so sexy, so seductive, such a good figure. One turned his head and said, your expression is so strange, who are you talking about? Medanzo said, ice scorpions and fire scorpions, God, don't you think so? One's expression was also a bit strange. They are demons after all. They can transform into human form but come out without clothes. Why are you thinking about them? Are you tempted by women again? Medanzo smiled and said, it's normal for men to be tempted occasionally, but I don't dare to touch women like that. They have scorpion stingers on them. If I were to get stung by them, it wouldn't feel good. Ah, one. What about the scorpions? Why are you thinking about the scorpions? Madanzo laughed and said, if I don't think about this kind of thing, where do you want me to think? The Scorpion King is really lucky. While and Madanzo were chatting, Walter and Raphael were also talking about the dangerous encounter they had just experienced. They had reached the southern part of the Saya Desert and were about to go their separate ways. Putting away the wind shuttle, they were sitting between two sand dunes to rest. Raphael said, I didn't expect to meet the Scorpion King this time and make such an agreement. You made an agreement with the Scorpion King on behalf of Saya. This is a good thing. Teacher will be happy. When we go back, we must announce this news as soon as possible. Walter said in a low voice, the Scorpion King is not stupid. Such an agreement is not bad for him, so he will agree on the spot. The most unexpected thing this time was meeting that Allaha. I have a feeling that the Scorpion King did not make a move because he was afraid of him. Otherwise, he would not have talked about making an agreement. Raphael also frowned. How can a 6th-level mage make the Scorpion King afraid? He may have some kind of secret, a means to restrain the Scorpion King. I heard that those monsters have unknown weaknesses. Walter added, that's not the point. What surprised me was the oath he made with the Scorpion King. If he violated it, one could never become a god, and the other would always be a human. Isn't it the same meaning? And it's complete nonsense. But they all looked serious. The Scorpion King does not joke. There must be a deeper meaning. Raphael echoed, I don't understand it either. That Allaha is really mysterious, but he is indeed our friend. Walter stood up and said, I have secretly recorded what happened with message magic, including every word that everyone said. When I go back, I will let teacher take a closer look. Maybe he will find some secrets. It's getting late. Let's part here. You go to Uruk. Be careful. Did not know that Walter had secretly recorded the scene of their encounter with the Scorpion King, intending to let Goliath analyze it. He and Madanzo continued forward. The sparse grass growing in the desert gradually became a grassland. They could even see the silhouettes of bison. A huge inland lake appeared in front of them. You have a good night's rest today. Meditation can help you recover your magic. How should we go tomorrow? Should we go around the lake or cross it directly? Madanzo looked at the big lake in the distance and said, there may be monsters in the lake, but there are also monsters on the shore. It doesn't matter which way we go. In fact, crossing the lake directly is the shortest time and the most dangerous. But we don't have a boat. If we swim with water magic, it will be more troublesome if we encounter monsters in the water. Laughed. We do have a boat, and it is very strong and safe. It can also cover us. It is safer than walking on land. Madanzo was surprised. Boat? Where is it? God, you are amazing. At this moment, Schrödinger suddenly poked his head out of the leather bag, stretched out his front paws and stretched out a long yawn, as if he had just woken up from a dream. A few days ago, when they encountered danger in the desert, and Madanzo did not notice, and the cat would call out in advance. But today, when they encountered a powerful enemy like the Scorpion King, it did not make a sound. Perhaps it was because of the strength of the Scorpion King, but Schrödinger felt that it did not matter whether he reminded it or not, or he did not want to appear in front of Walter and Raphael. It hid in the leather bag motionlessly as if it had disappeared, and only now did it come out. Madanzo was almost startled by it. He greeted half-jokingly, Kitty, long time no see. Schrödinger could not be bothered with it. He jumped down and found a comfortable grass nest to lie down. Laughed. Schrödinger is tired. Let's set up camp here today, and cross the lake after daybreak. Madanzo, there may be monsters in the lake. You must be prepared for another fierce battle. The camping spot Schrödinger chose was very good. After eating and resting, it was a peaceful night. After daybreak, 2 people and a cat continued their journey. Not far ahead, they arrived at the place where A escaped from the underworld. At that time, it was Schrödinger who used unimaginable power to guide him, and the cat was exhausted and fainted for many days. Now that they were back in the same place, he and the cat were full of energy, a far cry from when they were in a sorry state. The destination of this trip was the disappeared town of Duk and the savages deep in the mountains. That was where he and Schrödinger used to live. Today, they were going back again. Everything had changed so much that it made one feel endless sorrow. He was still the lonely traveler. Although he had lost his home, he still had everything in his heart. The experience of traveling the continent had given him more depth. It was not that one could not look back in life. The same scenery could always be lingered on, but it depended on whether one could read more from it. When they arrived at the lake, threw out a bone and it unfolded into an invisible boat. The boat was empty, and all the belongings were stored in Ventisalis. Schrödinger jumped onto the boat lightly and squatted in front. Also boarded the boat with the iron staff in his hand. This scene was so familiar. It was as if time had returned to the day when they set out to find Bear. Was a little distracted. He stood there for a long time before he noticed that one person was missing. He turned around and shouted, "Madanzo, what are you doing? Why haven't you boarded the boat yet?" Madanzo was dumbfounded. He stood there for a long time without saying a word. He even forgot to open his mouth. Only when he heard A's call did he come back to his senses. He exclaimed, "My God! What kind of artifact is this? It's so much more amazing than the wind-riding shuttle." A waved his hand and said, "Don't ask what it's called. For me, it's my life. Come on, pick up your staff. Today, you will be in charge of steering this boat across the lake." Madanzo jumped onto the boat and waved his staff nervously to control this invisible space. When A was still a level 3 magician, he could control the invisible boat very smoothly. Now that Madanzo had reached the peak of level 5, he quickly mastered the trick. This invisible boat was very easy to control. It was simply the most magical artifact in the world. It glided across the lake like a flying fish. Madanzo gradually felt high-spirited as he steered the boat. He shouted to A excitedly, "My God! Can this boat of life fly?" A replied, "In theory, it can fly, and it's much easier to control than the wind-riding shuttle. However, the space it has to spread out is very large, and the law of space is also very large. With my current strength, it's still very difficult for me to make it fly." Madanzo waved his staff and said, "I feel like it's about to fly. This feeling of riding the wind is really satisfying." He deliberately controlled the boat to float on the surface of the water, drawing all kinds of curves like a bird flying freely in the sky. A also felt that it was fun, so he smiled and said, "Be careful, there might be water monsters in the lake." The invisible boat sailed across the blue lake, rippling in the water. The water was very clear, and from time to time, a variety of large fishes could be seen swimming in the water. The wind wasn't strong, and there were a few cotton-like white clouds floating in the sky. In the distance, there were grasslands and mountains. In fact, the mountains were very far away. After crossing the lake, there was still a few hundred miles, and climbing up the mountains was the majestic Saya Plateau. The grasslands only surrounded the lake, and further away was the invisible swamp and forest where monsters roamed. When they reached the center of the lake, they could feel that the water was obviously cold, and there were almost no schools of fish. Madanzo exclaimed in surprise, "Why are there no monsters in the lake? I still want to show off my skills with this magical boat." Before he could finish, he heard Schrödinger's lazy cry. Then, a few large fishes leaped out of the lake, splashing up a lot of water as they fled in panic. He tapped his staff and said, "As you wish. Get ready to show off your skills." Madanzo also sensed a powerful force in front of him. Just as he raised his staff, a white line appeared on the surface of the water, and a huge tail suddenly flew out. The tail was as thick as a man and was covered with dark green scales. It swung out from the water, but it didn't cause much noise. In an instant, it arrived above the invisible boat. Yi was familiar with this scene. He had seen it before on the Euphrates River. He shouted, "This is the descendant of Humbaba, be careful." Even without Yi's warning, Madanzo had already made his move. The huge tail stopped in mid-air, emitting a sound like shattering glass. A translucent ice shield suddenly condensed in mid-air, disintegrating under the powerful impact. Yi was indeed a disciple of Yi's sect. Yi had also used this defensive technique on the Euphrates River. Forming an ice shield on the surface of the water was the fastest method. As the ice shield shattered, Madanzo's right hand had already unsheathed his longsword. He leaped into the air and slashed out. This reaction was the same as Yi's, except that Yi's weapon was an iron staff, while Madanzo's was a warrior's sword. The sword landed solidly on the snake's tail. The power of this strike could even split a rock in two. But only a few palm-sized phosphorescent flakes splashed off the snake's body. Yellow ripples spread across the snake's body, and it actually withstood the full force of a fifth-level warrior's strike. Two massive forces collided in midair, and Metatro was forcefully smashed down. The entire invisible ship sank downwards, parting the surface of the water as it was pushed back nearly 100 feet by the impact. Yi shouted, "I told you, this is the descendant of Humbaba. It's extremely strong in the water, you can't take it head-on." Madanzo steadied himself and shouted, "Is it also a 9-headed snake?" "You can't even chop off the tail, it's not easy to chop off all 9 heads." Yi replied, "It's a 1-headed snake. Humbaba is a 9-headed snake. Do you think you can show off when you meet me? Body arts to defend, divine arts to attack. Let me see how far you've trained in the power of the two sides." The giant tail had already retracted into the water. A loud, strange sound came from the depths of the lake. It sounded like muffled thunder, like a cow's roar. Two huge ugly heads popped out of the water, their jaws wide enough to swallow an adult. Their purple tongues were like blood-stained chains, and their bull-sized eyes were filled with rage. It was obvious that Madanzo's strike had hurt them. Madanzo shouted, "Yi, there's 2 of them." Yi shouted, "Not 2, it's a 2-headed snake." Madanzo said, Didn't you say there's only 1 head?" Yi shouted, "Cut the crap. You're no match for it in the water. Hurry up and get on shore." Madanzo didn't have any other problems, but he was talkative. At this time, he was still in the mood to talk to Yi. As he spoke, his hands were not idle. As soon as the snake's head appeared, he quickly steered the invisible ship to retreat. They were in the middle of the lake, so it didn't matter which direction they fled in. But as soon as the ship started moving, there was a huge movement behind them. The water surged up like a mountain, and countless condensed ice came crashing down. Madanzo shouted and waved his staff to the left. The surging lake seemed to be flattened by a giant hand in an instant. The ship forcibly slid a few hundred feet to the side, and was not directly smashed into the bottom of the lake by the giant wave. The edge of the giant ice still swept the invisible ship, and there was a rumbling sound. Fortunately, it was a spatial artifact. If it was a real ship, it would have been smashed. The ship shook violently, and Schrödinger, who was squatting at the bow, bounced a few times. He turned back and glared at Madanzo with dissatisfaction, as if scolding him for being too weak. Looking at the cat's appearance, it didn't seem to be afraid at all. Madanzo wasn't in the mood to bicker with the cat. He didn't even have the time to be long-winded. After the giant wave surged up, the thick snake tail once again emerged from the water. The body of this 2-headed strange snake was actually so huge. Its head was 100 feet in front of them, but its tail had circled around from the bottom of the water to launch a sneak attack. Another strike missed, and the strange snake roared again and again. A huge arc appeared on the surface of the lake, and the strange snake's entire body floated up. Unexpectedly, it formed an encirclement around the invisible ship, and was rapidly spiraling and shrinking. It saw that the invisible space where and the others were in was very strange, and wanted to use its huge body to wrap around it and grind it to pieces. Madanzo didn't dare to let the invisible ship be wrapped around by the snake. He shouted loudly and waved his staff with all his might. The water below rapidly surged up like a mountain, and the huge ship was tossed into the air. The ship flew out, and the huge ship landed on the body of the snake that was blocking it. In a flash, it turned into a hard layer of ice, and temporarily froze the snake's body. The invisible ship flew past the snake's encirclement, and landed on the surface of the water. The violent vibrations caused Schrödinger to roll a few times. Madanzo didn't care whether he could walk steadily or not. He waved his staff repeatedly, and a gale rose on the surface of the lake. The invisible ship shot towards the shore like an arrow. Chapter 109. The two-headed serpent was obviously enraged. It raised both of its heads and chased after them. Its giant tail swayed rapidly on the surface of the water, causing the waves to undulate like it was flying. However, it was still slower than the speed of the invisible ship. Nan and the others were getting further and further away. "Watch me say I'll go." The two heads of the serpent opened their mouths at the same time and let out a deafening roar. The roar was accompanied by a tremor that resonated on the surface of the water. Countless scale-like ripples appeared on the surface of the water. The surface of the lake shook, and many fishes popped out of the water with their bellies upturned. They had died a violent death. This resonance with the surface of the water was extremely lethal. Madanzo and the others had the protection of the invisible space, so they weren't hurt. However, the speed of the ship had slowed down. The surface of the water formed a resistance, and the buzzing air was also obstructed. Madanzo turned around and stood at the stern of the ship. He controlled the invisible ship to break through the obstacles. He waved his staff with all his might, while his other hand gripped his sword tightly. His expression was very solemn. His waving of the staff was not as graceful as usual. It was like holding a heavy brush and painting a wall. It was extremely strenuous. Beads of sweat rolled down his forehead. Every time he waved his staff, the line of sight behind the ship would blur. It was as if space was distorted, and the shockwaves would disappear for a moment. The invisible ship suddenly accelerated forward. Using spatial magic to obstruct the pursuit of the serpent was indeed the most effective method. However, the power of the spatial law was quickly dispersed by the shockwaves. The two-headed serpent was still closing in. Gang had just broken through from the 4th level to the 5th level. He hadn't had the time to train his true strength. When he encountered the serpent in the Euphrates River, he wasn't a match for it at all. He had to use a scroll to deal with it. Now that Madanzo had reached the peak of the 5th level, and he had the protection of the mysterious invisible ship, as long as he didn't make any mistakes, he should be able to put up a good fight against the serpent. But today, the two-headed serpent was obviously much stronger than the one he encountered in the Euphrates River. Gang could see clearly that even if Madanzo had reached the peak of the 5th level, he still wouldn't be able to deal with the serpent. It was already very rare for him to be able to test out the monster snake's strength and keep playing with it until now. Quiet took out the god's tear and quickly embedded it at the top of the staff. This was the first time he had used the god's tear on a staff. The iron branch staff was finally able to unleash its full power. Looking at the strange snake, it was already very close. Its two huge heads, one on the left and one on the right, formed a pincer attack dozens of feet away. Its eyes were very strange, with one eye on each head being black, while the other was bluish-green. Madanzo shouted, "Ah God, I can't hold on much longer. This strange snake is so strong, how can it know magic? Could it be that it also knows the power of two sides?" Wu-Yi was not in the mood to be long-winded. She suddenly shouted, "Stop the boat." Madanzo waved his staff with all his might, and a spatial rift appeared in front of the giant snake. He no longer urged the invisible ship to fly away. The ship continued to drift forward, slowing down on the trembling surface of the lake. The serpent's roar shattered the distorted space, and two heads emerged from the chaos. The scales on the serpent's neck were glowing, yellow and green, as though it was about to cast some kind of divine spell. Just at that moment, a golden light scattered in the air, accompanied by a chant, "Strength comes with a strong heart." Who is it that struggles before faith? Who thinks he has broken free from the cage, only to be chained? This was a magic of the temple of Isis, called the Golden Chain. It was actually a very mysterious high-order spatial magic. Its effect was similar to the advanced magic, spatial shackle, but its power was more mysterious and powerful. It was not crazy Ol who taught it to him. Fan had secretly learned it from the ancient books, and he was able to cast it with ease with the iron staff. The golden light condensed into invisible shackles, binding the two huge heads of the giant snake. The snake struggled on the surface of the water, but its neck seemed to be tightly gripped by two invisible giant hands. Leaped high into the air and waved his staff. Don't forget that he was a level 6 warrior, and his staff was also a weapon. Jumped more than 30 feet high, and his staff heavily hit the junction between the two necks and the snake's body. But there was no splash of snake phosphor, not even a sound. A violent shock wave spread along the snake's body, as if someone had used a sledgehammer to crack open a mining core. It reminded people of the skills of Duk miners. The impact of the staff was really strong. Ah's body was bounced back and fell back on the ship. The huge invisible ship was thrown back dozens of feet. The 200-foot-long snake's body froze for a moment, as if it was temporarily paralyzed by the shock wave. Ah's staff could not kill the two-headed snake, and he did not even want to hurt it. He just froze the snake for a moment. Ah returned to the ship and flicked his staff upwards. The lake water rolled up and encircled the snake's body, forming a huge ice shell. The ice was thick and solid, forming almost instantaneously along with the surge of water. But it did not directly wrap around the snake's body. There was a layer of space between the ice and the snake's body, and a layer of flame rapidly ignited on the snake's body. The flame was light red at first, but quickly turned blue and white, and finally became light gold. A scorching heat wrapped around the ice, but the direction of the flame was directed towards the snake's body. The heat drilled into the scales, and unexpectedly did not melt the outer layer of ice. The two-headed snake hissed in pain, frantically twisting its body. Cracks appeared on the huge ice shell. The flames suddenly disappeared, all drilled into the scales. Cracks appeared on the ice shell due to the snake's struggle, but these cracks quickly mended. The huge ice shell rapidly grew inwards, thickening and finally completely enveloping the snake's body. The snake's body emitted a radiance, dark brown and dark blue, constantly flickering, as though it was resisting the scorching heat with some kind of magic. But in the instant that the ice shell grew and enveloped the snake's body, a series of explosions rang out. The scorching heat and cold clashed, and the ice inside the snake instantly melted into steam. The huge pressure caused the snake's body and ice shell to explode. The snake's scales flew everywhere, and its blood was a mess. But it was still struggling madly. Ah shouted and quickly waved his staff. His movements were very strange. The space around the snake's body twisted and blurred, and countless twisting cracks appeared. Following the explosion of the ice shell, the spatial rift also split apart. The monstrous serpent's body finally broke into pieces, transforming into indistinct bloody fragments that floated on the surface of the lake amidst the crushed ice. It was finally annihilated. Madanzo sat down on the ship and sighed in surprise. "Ah God, you finished it in one move. What kind of magic was that?" Ah replied, "Song of Ice and Fire." He waved his staff and used Ventussel to collect all the snake's scales and bones, including 2 tendons and 8 fangs. Madanzo was surprised. "I've never heard of it before." Ah replied, "I've never heard of it either. I only saw it in a scroll. The scroll was condensed from the writer's mana, and I learned it from the scroll. The snake is dead. Let's continue to the other side of the lake. Don't disturb me for now." Ah placed his magic staff flat on the deck, as he shut his eyes and entered into a deep meditative state. It was as though he had turned a blind eye to the tragic aftermath of the battle, as though he hadn't made a move at all. Madanzo was puzzled, but he couldn't ask any questions. The battle had exhausted him, and he could only force the ship to slowly drift to the other side of the lake. The lake was huge, and the ship moved very slowly. It took them a day and a night to drift to the other side. Was still sitting there, as if he didn't know what was happening around him. Fortunately, they didn't encounter any other monsters in the lake. Schrödinger turned his body to look at His expression was complicated, both gratified and worried at the same time. It wasn't that Xiang wanted to wash his hands of the matter at this time, but after he killed the two-headed serpent, he suddenly felt a burst of absent-mindedness. In this absent-mindedness, there was also some kind of enlightenment, as if a window was about to open. He immediately immersed his mind to capture and experience this ray of light. He didn't gain much from this long journey. Of course, the real harvest wasn't the items he collected. Meeting the Scorpion King Si Shui, and making that oath, finally solved a question that had been bothering him for a long time. If Crazy, Ole and Bear were still here, could clearly tell them that the path they spent their entire lives searching for did exist. The power of two sides wasn't created by Crazy, Ole, it had existed since ancient times. From the Scorpion King's tone, it was obvious that he knew this secret. It wasn't just humans. Even a scorpion could become a legendary deity if it reached the end of this path. When boarded the invisible ship again and sailed to the other side, he no longer had any doubts about the answer to this question. Schrödinger unfolded his bones and jumped onto the ship's bow. The ship sailed into the unknown. The reincarnated scene touched In the lake, he was attacked by the descendants of Humbaba. Finally killed the snake, using the Song of Ice and Fire, but without the help of the scrolls. He used the magic he learned from the scrolls and the secret magic of the Temple of Isis. No one taught him these, including the mining skills of Duk. He didn't get the approval of the gods. Had a feeling that the path to becoming a deity was there, whether the gods existed or not. The legendary deities had only walked this path and passed all kinds of tests that were inconceivable to ordinary people. But these tests were always there, and even the immortal gods could fall. Clearly saw the path he had walked and the future he was going to face. He used to want to see Iko, but when he saw her, things had changed. She was the holy maiden of the Temple of Isis. But he could still look into her eyes calmly. He wanted to go back to Duk, cross the desert, and experience all kinds of dangers. The other side was the legendary land of Marduk, the hometown where he grew up. His wishes and his actions, his pursuit and his path, were far away on the other side. It was like the fusion of fate and reincarnation. It could be said that this was the fusion of faith and belief. The ship suddenly shook. It was not because it encountered a monster, but because it ran aground on the shore of the lake. Opened his eyes, stood up, and walked down the ship with his staff in hand. The scene in front of him was a bit like a dream. He finally set foot on this land. The feeling of stepping on the ground was so real that he almost fell. Madanzo, who was following behind, was already exhausted. Seeing that was about to fall, he hurriedly reached out to help him. However, turned around and stood still. He asked, "Have we arrived? Isn't this nonsense? It's not like I can't see it." Madanzo panted and replied, "Yes, we've finally reached the shore. I almost fell down from exhaustion." You're finally awake." Glanced at Madanzo and said, "Well, you look like you can't hold on much longer. Let's go back to the ship. You have a good rest. I'll steer the ship." Madanzo asked in confusion, "We've finally reached the shore. Where do you still want to steer the ship?" Who had just stepped off the ship, turned around and got back on the ship. He replied, "The way forward, of course." Madanzo had to get back on the ship and sit down to catch his breath. Schrödinger did not get off the ship. It looked at with a smile in its eyes. Then, something amazing happened. Raised his staff forward, and the invisible ship actually went ashore. It glided forward on the soft grassy mud. Occasionally, it would hit bushes and rocks. The ship floated up lightly and just brushed past the treetops. It looked like it was still sailing in the water. Madanzo was stunned. My God, what kind of power is this? Your magic power has grown so much overnight. Shook his head. My magic hasn't grown much. After yesterday's battle, it hasn't even fully recovered. It's just that the way I use my power is different. The perfect fusion of my soul and power. It's no longer a power that has been awakened, but a power that belongs to me naturally. That's why I can do things that I couldn't do before. Madanzo blinked. I don't quite understand. Explained, it's like opening a window. I can see the world and myself more clearly. Just like the ship under your feet. If you can't find it, how can you control it? Go one step further and integrate it into your power. It's like a part of your body and mind. Only then will you be able to do more. Low-grade, mid-grade, and high-grade magic are all different ways of using power. Awakening, using, transforming, and finally, it has to be integrated with the body and mind. It's as if it's innate. There's no need to think too much about it. Madanzo was stunned for a long time before he reacted. He asked, have you already? Nodded lightly. There was no surprise in his voice. Yes, I have already achieved the 7th level. I'm a supreme sorcerer. According to the law of the power of two sides, I will also be a supreme warrior. Madanzo exclaimed, You must be a god born on earth. As far as I know, you are the youngest supreme sorcerer or mage in the world. At the same time, you are also the youngest supreme warrior. On this day, Achia turned 18 years old and finally broke through the 7th level of the power of two sides. Crazy Ol once said that on this day, would no longer be afraid of his identity as a sorcerer. No matter which city the shrine was, they would be willing to recruit him. Not only would they give him a noble birth, but they would also enjoy an honorable status. The day had finally come. But smiled bitterly when he thought of Crazy Ol's message. The situation was a little different from what he had expected. Could no longer appear as a supreme sorcerer, because he was also a supreme warrior. On the Dubhe continent, no one had ever heard of someone who could master this power. He had already appeared as a warrior in the Temple of Isis. Even if he became a supreme warrior, it was impossible for him to become a supreme mage at the same time. If this secret were to be exposed, one could imagine what kind of uproar it would cause, and perhaps even the punishment of the gods. If he returned to the Temple of Isis, he could only appear as a supreme warrior. This was exactly what Maria wanted. But in other places, a 7th-level supreme sorcerer would indeed have a lot of convenience. At least he could appear as Allah and did not have to hide his magic too much. Thinking of this, he turned to Madanzo and said, You don't have to envy anyone's achievements. Rest well, feel the recovery of your strength, and you will have new discoveries. This is the most important thing for you now. Madanzo sat down to rest and also entered a state of meditation. He was so tired that he could hardly move, but his mouth was not idle just now. Drove the invisible ship through the soft mud and long grass. After passing the small grassland by the lake, an endless swamp appeared in front of him. Everywhere was bubbling mud, large pools, and trees above the water. It was impossible to pass through on foot, and there was no way to go. The newly advanced supreme sorcerer, drove the invisible ship, choosing to travel between the swamp and the water. He glided and flew with 2 people and a cat, almost completely ignoring the difficulties and rugged terrain. Was also familiarizing himself with the power that had just integrated into his body and mind. Although it was not strong, it was a completely different feeling. He seemed to have entered a new world, and the world in front of him was exactly the lost home he wanted to find. And Madanzo did not say a word, but Schrödinger yawned and meowed twice in dissatisfaction. Ah thought that another monster had appeared, but after activating detection magic for a long time, he did not find any movement. Schrödinger raised his voice and meowed twice, and then he reacted and said, "Oh, I'm sorry, it's been 2 days and 1 night. I only cared about the journey and forgot about other things. Don't worry, I'll find a place to stop and give you some good wine. You've worked hard these 2 days." Ah was already a rare supreme sorcerer and supreme warrior on the continent. No matter which identity he appeared in, he would enjoy a respected status wherever he went. But Ah was still the miner from Duk, and Schrödinger was still the arrogant cat. He did not take a supreme sorcerer and a supreme warrior seriously. He squatted there and nodded with satisfaction, waiting for Ah to prepare good wine for him. "I'm still out of town, so I borrowed the computer to find a place to write in my spare time. There is only one last day of this month, please give me your monthly ticket." Chapter 110. Within the swamp, there were patches of land protruding out of the water. Treading on it wouldn't sink, and lush vegetation grew over it like isolated islands of varying sizes. As the water level hadn't receded for a long time, the trees weren't too tall, and served as a hiding and resting place for many wild animals. This was not the final landscape after the flood receded. Surrounded by the charcoal marsh in the west, the mountains of the Euphrates Valley in the east, the Saya Plateau in the north and the Saya Desert in the south, thousands of miles of fertile land were still forming. It would take a few years before passage would be unimpeded. Even then, it would not be easy to reach here. Ah found a dry and high slope exposed to the water, and used gas magic to send out shock waves to scare away the wild animals here. Then, he stopped the invisible ship in a flat area. Seeing that Madanzo was still sitting quietly in the ship, he did not put away the space, and only brought Schrödinger down to cook. Ah roasted a fresh snake with all kinds of spices. He had been with Schrödinger for so long, but actually did not know what a cat liked to eat. Everything was made according to the cat's taste. But Schrödinger seemed to enjoy the delicacies of the human world the most. Of course, there was also good wine. When Ah left Montefiore, he specially bought the best wine. Although Ah was young and rarely drank, his taste was absolutely superb. The town of Duk once sold the best wine in the continent, and his father was the most famous drunkard in the town. Therefore, regardless of the price of the wine he bought, the taste was absolutely unquestionable. Perhaps this was the wine that satisfied Schrödinger the most. Apart from roasting the snake and the wine, Ah also cooked a pot of fragrant fruit and vegetable beef soup, processed with secret magic pine. This was his best culinary skill. Schrödinger had not eaten for almost 3 days. The man and the cat ate happily. At dusk, Madanzo finally opened his eyes, sniffed his nose, stood up and walked down the ship. "Ah, what is so fragrant? There's even wine. This will attract the nearby monsters." Ah smiled. "But Schrödinger is hungry. No matter what, we have to eat. How is your recovery? If there are monsters, can you defeat them?" Madanzo said with a bitter face. "After coming ashore, my strength has been exhausted. Just now, I only recovered less than 10%. Of course it's no problem to deal with ordinary beasts, but if it's a powerful monster, I can't take it. Let me eat something first." Schrödinger did not need a cup of wine, but directly held the bottle. He drank directly of the wine. The wine of the bottle was fragrant. This monster looked like both a lizard and a crocodile, but its tail was very long, almost taking up half of its body length. Its long tail was segmented like a scorpion's tail, and its tip was curved. It was about 3 feet long. They poked their heads out of the swamp and saw the fire on the high slope, but did not dare to approach. Madanzo was already frightened by the scorpion and snake. He held his staff in one hand and his sword in the other and stood guard for a long time. Only then did he realize that these scorpion dragons were very timid and weren't very aggressive animals. He sat down and drank his soup before sighing, Ah God, you told me about the legend of the ancient war of the gods. The gods created 9 types of monsters, one of which was the scorpion dragon. But these scorpion dragons don't seem very strong. How could they participate in the war of the gods? Schrödinger stared at Metatro with a look of disdain as he hugged the bottle with his front paws. The scorpions we encountered in the desert were also vulnerable in the war of the gods, but the scorpion king Jirishui is definitely qualified, and I think the same is true of Humbaba, the 9-headed serpent. I'm afraid some of the 9 types of monsters created by the gods were destroyed in the war of the gods. Even if Humbaba survived, he was later beheaded. I've seen Humbaba's descendant in the Euphrates River. It was a terrible mutant water dragon. The 2-headed serpent we encountered today was even more powerful, so it occupied the lake. But I don't think all the monsters' descendants are so fierce, unless we meet the original 9 types of monsters, such as the Scorpion King Giraffe. I'm not sure if the original scorpion dragons are still around, but I've seen them before. They're like ordinary ironbacks, not very scary. Medanzo slapped his thigh and said, when you mention ironbacks, I think of El March. Ordinary ironbacks aren't that scary, but those mutant ironbacks are. Especially the Ironback King, El March. He almost killed me and Link. El Mar was not a monster created by the gods. It was a mutated Ironback King. It had amazing strength and could even instinctively cast divine spells. I have an idea, but I don't know if it's right. Tell me if you have an idea. Medanzo rubbed the back of his head and said, Humbaba and Giraffe may not have been created by the gods. They're mutant beast kings. Their origin is similar to El Mar's. They've gained intelligence and instinctive power. It was the gods who discovered and trained them, just like how the Scorpion King trained the giant scorpion army. Ah Shen, didn't you also teach me the Cloud Dream body art and divine skills? El Mar can understand your words. Although it can't learn body arts and divine arts like humans, it can train its innate power according to the method you taught it. Aragorn nodded, your idea makes sense. But El Mar can't speak, and it can't transform into a human like the Scorpion King. If one day it can transform into a human, it may be able to systematically train the power of 2 sides. I remember the Scorpion King once said that humans have a godlike body, so it should be the most convenient way to train this power. Speaking of this, Medanzo suddenly laughed. Aragorn glared at him and said, your laugh is so strange. What are you thinking about? Why do I feel that it's not a good idea? Metatro chuckled and said, I still don't know if El Mar is male or female. If he can transform into a human one day, I don't know if he'll be a man or a woman. He can't be like those scorpions who stroll around naked. If such a day really comes, won't you become one of those ancient gods who created monsters? Aragorn also laughed, I'm also curious. Let's wait and see. This time when we go to Link's tribe, I plan to let Link teach El Mar how to write. It will be more convenient for him to learn more advanced magic in the future. I have seen the ancient books of shape-shifting magic in the Temple of Isis. Its foundation is message magic. It starts as an illusion, but when it reaches a higher level, it becomes more than just an illusion. I always feel that it is not for humans to practice. If El Mar can learn it, I can let him try. Medanzo asked curiously, can the Ironback also write? It can't speak yet. Aragorn can try. El Mar is a mutant Ironback king, it can also understand my words. At the same time, Aragorn glanced at Schrödinger and thought to himself, this cat can't speak either, but it can even write hieroglyphs. It's not impossible for the Ironback. Schrödinger was holding the bottle and drinking happily, ignoring the conversation between the two. Medanzo asked again, Aragorn, you haven't answered my question yet. I asked it when I was fighting the 2-headed snake. That snake also knows magic, and it is as strong as its physical strength. Is it also practicing the power of 2 sides? Who taught it? Aragorn fell into deep thought. After a long time, he replied, maybe it is just an instinctive awakening of power. Elmar can also use skills similar to earth elemental magic, but it was not the priests who taught them the power. They don't have systematic experience, so it is very difficult for them to master the power. But on the other hand, they are not bound by experience, so they don't care about body arts or magic. Instead, they practice the power of two sides. Madanzo frowned and said, Elmar's situation was like this at the beginning. Is it the same for Humbaba and the Scorpion King? If Elmar didn't meet you, I'm afraid he will always be an iron back in the pool. Scorpion King and Humbaba may have been taught by the gods. They are not human, so their path of practice is also different from that of humans. The so-called power of two sides is just my conclusion. It doesn't matter what it is called. The gods don't want it to be spread in the human world, so we have to be careful. Madanzo nodded and said, I've always been careful. Even in front of Princess Cicely, I didn't show any flaws. You should remind Link. In fact, I've always thought that the two-headed snake's death was not worth it. If it didn't chase us, everyone would be safe. It is not as good as the Scorpion King, but at least it knows how to negotiate. A sighed and said, it had gained simple intelligence and realized that it had grasped great power. It had desires that were beyond its animal instincts, so it became the king of the lake. However, this power ended up harming itself in the end, Madanzo said. It must have thought that it has us, so it chased us relentlessly. But it didn't expect you to kill it in one move. Aragorn suddenly thought of something, and solemnly warned, I've told you before, try not to kill. If you have to kill, try to use your strongest power. But sometimes, the strongest power is also the weakest power. If you fight endlessly and launch countless attacks, the power you use will be much greater than a fatal blow. We will encounter monsters along the way. If we fight like this every time, I'm afraid we won't be able to reach our destination. We have to be careful and try not to get into any conflicts. It's best if we don't fight. They continued their journey after dawn. After walking for nearly 100 miles through the swamp, they arrived at a grassland and shrubs. This land had only been out of the water for less than a year, so it had yet to form a lush forest. As they walked through the shrubs and weeds, Aragorn kept the invisible ship. He didn't want to waste his magic power for nothing. There were many wild buffaloes on the grassland. They were as tall as a human, and their curved horns extended forward. They were very docile, leisurely grazing in herds. Madanzo said, the horns of these buffaloes are really special. If they charge in herds, it would be a very terrifying scene. Are they the descendants of one of the 9 legendary monsters, the wild buffaloes? Aragorn replied, I've seen these buffaloes in the mountains. They usually don't attack people, but when they are disturbed and run in herds, their hooves and horns are very dangerous. Let's stay away from them and not provoke them. They quietly passed through the herd of buffaloes. Madanzo suddenly opened his mouth and pointed into the distance. Aragorn, what do you see over there? There was another buffalo in the distance. It was much larger than a male elephant, and its huge horns were curved like a giant bow. The tips of its horns gleamed with a cold light. As it walked through the grassland, it looked like a moving mountain. It was a very frightening sight. However, many birds landed on its body. The giant buffalo looked very peaceful. It looked up at Aragorn and Madanzo in the distance, then lowered its head and continued to nibble on the shrubs as if nothing had happened. Aragorn said, this must be the legendary wild buffalo. Madanzo stuck out his tongue. That's a really big word. Could it be the wild buffalo created by the gods? Aragorn didn't look like it. The 9 monsters created by the gods all had the power to participate in the War of the Gods. This buffalo should be its descendant, or a variant of the wild buffalo king. We can just go around it. Be careful, don't step on cow dung. The two of them passed through the grassland. The soil in front of them became wet again, and when they stepped on it, it would sink up to their knees. However, this kind of mud could not hinder Aragorn and Madanzo. They only left 2 lines of shallow footprints on the muddy ground, and their figures gradually disappeared into the distant horizon. A night passed, but the footprints did not completely disappear. At noon the next day, 2 black dots appeared on the horizon. The black dots quickly grew bigger. It was actually Madanzo and Aragorn who had returned, and they were still running. An unpleasant hissing sound came from behind them. When they looked up, they saw a terrifying scene. A monster was in hot pursuit. It was the legendary giant swamp snake. This serpent wasn't as large as the 2-headed serpent, but it was still over 60 feet long. Its body was as thick as a bucket, and there was a foot-tall bright red tumor on its head, shaped like a male's crown. What was more frightening was that although the snake did not have a long body, it had a pair of membrane-like wings. When spread out, they were more than 30 feet wide, like the wings of a giant bat. Its tail dragged along the ground as it swam, while its upper body flapped its wings to soar in the air. The flapping of its wings carried fine wind blades, slicing up grass and shrubs wherever it passed. Aragorn said as he ran. "I told you to be careful not to provoke monsters. You've provoked this big guy again, and it's a mutated giant swamp snake with wings. Fortunately, it's not the legendary flying snake king." Madanzo mumbled. "I really didn't mean it, I just took a dip in the water. I didn't expect it to come out, I was almost scared to death." "Aragorn, I told you to handle it, and you did it just like that? We've run so far back, and we've wasted a day's journey." Madanzo's face was bitter. "Aragorn, you're not willing to help, and I've only recovered less than 20% of my strength. How can I fight it? I think this snake is the leader of the monsters in the swamp. Let's lure it here, and we'll be able to return unimpeded." As he spoke, the 2 had already dashed past the herd of buffaloes. The winged snake had also chased after them, and the terrifying commotion alarmed the herd of buffaloes that were grazing. Many of the buffaloes began to run in panic, and many of them blocked the path of the strange snake. The hooves and horns of the buffaloes were fatal to humans, but the gigantic winged snake was completely unafraid. With a flap of its wings or a sweep of its long tail, the buffaloes in front of it were sent flying far away. The herd of buffaloes became even more panicked, and let out waves of terrified cries as they ran. An earth-shattering roar resounded from afar, and the earth seemed to tremble. As it turned out, the gigantic mutated bull had discovered the commotion here. It lowered its head, raised its hooves, and charged over with all its might. Madanzo, who was running away, whispered, "Aragorn, speed up and turn the corner. Let's get out of the way and let the monster fight the monster." Aragorn grabbed Madanzo's arm and suddenly sped up. At the same time, he used the stealth magic. His figure was so fast that he was like a wisp of smoke, faintly discernible. He circled around and slipped away among the galloping buffaloes. The wild buffaloes that were rushing toward them just happened to encounter the giant swamp snake. They returned the way they came, and behind them came the roars of the wild buffaloes and the hisses of the giant snake. Smoke and dust rose from the grassland, and the wind blew violently. The uprooted shrubs flew into the air one after another. The 2 big guys were fighting. Madanzo, who had already run far away, said with lingering fear, "What do you think of these 2 monsters? Which one of them is going to win?" Aragorn replied, "This is not the territory of the giant swamp snake. When 2 powerful monsters suddenly fight, they usually won't fight with their lives on the line. One will only beat the other back. We'd better take advantage of the fact that the swamp snake is not here and leave quickly." They walked in this treacherous wasteland for a few more days, trying their best to avoid all kinds of dangers. If they really could not avoid it, they would pick up weapons and fight. Aragorn did not let Madanzo fight again. Whenever they encountered a situation, he would personally resolve it with his iron staff. Along the way, he recorded the terrain and information of the monsters. One day, they finally arrived at the old site of the town of Duk. This place had just emerged from the water not long ago. It was a huge island surrounded by swamps and jungles. The soil was black and very fertile. It was already overgrown with weeds. Calculating the area, this isolated island was more than enough to accommodate thousands of people. And as the flood finally receded, thousands of miles of fertile land would be connected. Aragorn stood in his hometown with his staff in hand. His eyes were filled with tears and he was silent for a long time. A cat was squatting at his feet. There was even a hint of melancholy in Schrodinger's eyes. Aragorn stood from noon to sunset, staring blankly at the wasteland without saying a word. It was not until dusk that Medanzo asked in a worried tone, "Aragorn, is this our destination, the town of Duk?" Aragorn wiped the corners of his eyes and nodded, "Yes, this is the town of Duk." Mountain torrents rushed down from the Saya Plateau. Everyone, including their houses, cattle and sheep, was swept away. Nothing is left. Mud has covered the original land. We are standing on it now. Medanzo said softly, "Aragorn, don't be too sad. You are back after all. In the future, this place will become a prosperous home again. Your wish will come true." Chapter 111. That night, they rested on the land of Duk. Amon and Medanzo talked about the other purpose of this trip, which was to bring the people of Link's tribe here to build a village. The cavemen lived a hard life in the mountains. There was no suitable land for farming, and hunting was dangerous. Since the flood, many roads in the mountains had been cut off. Many beasts had become extinct. Some caveman tribes had been completely wiped out. Link's tribe lived in an even more difficult environment. If they hadn't caught enough beasts during the flood and learned how to make meat floss that could be stored for a long time, it would have been very difficult for them to survive until now. Link had led his people to catch many young beasts to raise, so that his people could barely survive. In fact, Link had long wanted to lead his people out of the mountains and find a fertile land to live in. Now the opportunity had come. He reminded Amon, "You said that this land belongs to the Dushans, and you want the cavemen to build a village here. Won't there be any conflicts between your people and Link's people?" Amon asked Metatro, "You said that this land belongs to the Dushans." Amon replied, "I've thought about this a long time ago. Don't worry. The land of Duk, including the farmlands and mines outside the town, can be checked. There used to be more than 2,000 people living here, but now there are less than 100 of them. These lands belong to them, and Link's people will not occupy them. The fertile land that has surfaced is much larger than the original Duk land. Link's people can cultivate and reproduce for generations." Medanzo narrowed his eyes. "It's not easy for dozens of people to come all the way here. It's true that someone should build a village first to provide shelter. This place is full of monsters. We need to unite to survive and have a better future." Amon nodded. "The monsters are not the only threat. As the flood recedes, this place will become 1,000 miles of fertile land, which can accommodate millions of people. I'm afraid that no power on the continent will give up this territory, so there will be disputes. But no matter what, my people only built their homes. Medanzo, I have a mission for you. When Link and the others arrive, help Link train warriors, forge weapons, and build defenses. Make all the necessary preparations. They are the best craftsmen." When the sun rose the next day, Amon set off again with Schrödinger on his shoulder. Leaning on his iron stick, he crossed several swamps still surrounded by water and entered the jungles of the Euphrates Valley, just as he did when he first left Duk. Medanzo advised, "Don't you want to stay in your homeland for a few more days?" Amon replied, "I'm already here, and I'll be back again. I know how to remember it." After the flood, many roads in the mountains were cut off. In many places, narrow lakes were formed between two mountains. Amon and Medanzo took turns to take the mountain road and the water road. Finally, they reached the plateau where Link's tribe was located. When they appeared at the entrance of the tribe, everyone was stunned. The whole tribe came to greet them. They knelt together as if they were welcoming the arrival of a god. Medanzo hid in a corner, embarrassed, but Schrödinger squatted there and accepted the people's worship. Link hurriedly ran out of the house without putting on his pants. He separated the crowd and grabbed Amon's sleeve. My God, you're finally back. We've been waiting for you every day. That night, just outside the big cave where the bonfire was burning, the whole tribe held a grand carnival. Amon and Link discussed the relocation, and the cavemen readily agreed. They couldn't wait to leave immediately the next day. Amon, however, told Link not to worry and to leave in 2 months. The whole tribe needed to be prepared for the migration, and Madanzo also needed to recover his strength here. After nearly 2 years, Link had already achieved the 5th level of the power of 2 sides. When he heard that Madanzo had also achieved the 5th level, he said proudly, "It seems that we're about the same. You've been staying with Ammonius all the time, but you're not much stronger than me." Amon smiled and said, "Really? You'll know about Madanzo's situation soon. You haven't forgotten to work hard." Link replied, "Of course. Since you left, I haven't stopped practicing the power of 2 sides for a day." Amon nodded with satisfaction. "That's good. You'll have a test soon. What about Elmar, the Ironback King? I heard that you can't find an opponent in the mountains to train with, so you often practice with Elmarch." Link replied with some embarrassment, "Originally, if it was a one-on-one fight, I would be a little stronger than Elmar, but he also has the help of 4 big Ironbacks, so they are a little stronger than me together." Amon smiled. "Don't say it, I understand all. You didn't take advantage of him once. I'll give you a task during this time. Don't fight with Elmar anymore. Teach him to write, just like I taught you." Link opened his mouth wide and shouted, "What? Teach Elmar to write? Can the Ironbacks also write?" Madanzo slapped him. "Why not? We met the Scorpion King in the desert, and he could talk in human form. There were 2 female scorpions in human form next to him. You didn't see them. They came out without clothes, and their bodies." Amon interrupted him. "Elmar is very smart. You are still no match for him, which means that he understands what I taught him at the beginning and is also practicing in his own way. It's not impossible for him to learn to write. In the future, he is more likely to be as powerful as the Scorpion King and be the best guardian of his people." Link asked, "You also met the Scorpion King? The experience of leaving the mountains was really wonderful. You must tell me about it." Amon patted him on the shoulder and said, "Don't worry, let Madanzo tell you slowly. This time I want to teach you something new. The focus is on making various kinds of weapons and magic tools. The practice of the power of 2 sides can't rely too much on external things. After all, it's not your own power. It can even lead to obsession and greed. But the process of making things is a kind of training for your magic power and will." Amon lived in the caveman tribe again. After becoming a supreme mage and a supreme warrior, he had a lot of new insights into the power of 2 sides. He taught Madanzo and Link without reservation. At the same time, he focused on teaching them some processing and refining methods of magic tools. Some of the tools were not yet in the condition to make, but some things could be tried. Amon also made weapons himself. The abnormally hard carapace of the giant scorpions could be made into scales and supplemented with magic processing. Not only could it resist weapons, but it could also absorb and transform energy impacts. It was a very good defensive tool. The phosphorescence of the 2-headed serpent could be preserved after such a violent impact of magic. Naturally, it was very strong and could even resist some of the damage caused by magic. Not only could the phosphorescence be made into scales, but there was also a protruding bone spur in the middle of the fan-shaped scale. When the 2 edges of the scale were ground flat, only this spur was left, and it could be made into very sharp arrowheads. The stinger of the scorpion was also a material for making arrowheads, and this kind of arrowhead was highly toxic. Although the venom left in the stinger could not be used repeatedly, it was powerful enough. Amon also collected the spine and ribs of the 2-headed serpent. The ribs could be processed into the spine of a bow, and the spine could be made into the handle of a weapon. These bones could also be made into wands, but the making of wands was much more difficult. Wands had to be processed with living materials. For example, the core of walnut wood that had grown for hundreds of years was the most popular material for making wands. The bones of this monster were even rarer. Amon carefully studied his iron wand and found that it had been processed by crazy Ol. There were extremely fine growth lines inside, so it could be used as both a weapon and a wand. Amon did not know how to do this. It seemed that he was still far from the top artifact masters on the continent. Link and Madanzo were even worse. Madanzo's power was still recovering. Link first tried to make a tool, starting with the simplest scorpion scale armor. It was not difficult to turn the carapace into a scale armor, as long as one had enough patience. But it was not easy to add magic to it. Link destroyed almost half of the carapace, and it took him a month to successfully make a perfect scorpion scale armor. Such an astonishing waste and extravagance would have made anyone else's heart bleed, but Amon did not care too much. He told Link that this was a necessary process. Any outstanding artificer had to use an astonishing amount of precious materials to build up their skills. As their magic power, level, and skills increased, they would become more and more proficient in crafting artifacts. Only then would they be able to craft even more precious artifacts. The most precious materials in Amon's hands were the 8 fangs and the 2 serpent tendons. He decided to make them himself. Of the 8 snake fangs, 4 were long and 4 were short. Amon started with a simple method. He destroyed 2 of the short fangs and used the other 2 to make 2 curved scimitars. These 2 scimitars were light and sharp, and even had the function of a wand. They could assist in the casting of magic in battle, and naturally had a roaring impact on the mind. He gave the 2 slender scimitars to Madanzo and Link respectively. They were both a beautiful decoration and a good weapon in battle, much stronger than the average warrior's sword. Next, Amon used 4 of the long fangs to make the spine of the bow. Although he was very careful, he still destroyed one. When he used the serpent tendons to make the bowstring, he destroyed even more. The 3 short bowstrings added up to less than 10 feet long, but he used up more than 30 feet of serpent tendons to make it. The power of these 3 bows was quite strong, and ordinary people could not even pull them. They were also a kind of magic artifact that could assist in the casting of water element magic. They could also condense magic arrows out of thin air and shoot them. They were a kind of weapon that could also be used by mages. Naturally, these 3 bows were for Amon, Link, and Madanzo, and they were also equipped with arrows made of serpent phosphor bone spurs. After processing the 2 scimitars, 3 bows, and a batch of arrows, Amon did not do anything else. He gave all the remaining materials to Link. He could make as many things as he wanted, and it would be a practice. When Amon finished processing these artifacts, more than a month had passed, and Madanzo's strength had completely recovered. He was surprised to find that his strength was still increasing, so he came to ask Amon what was going on. Amon smiled and said, "Congratulations, you have already achieved the 6th level. You can practice many high-level magic and body arts. I will teach them to you before I leave." Madanzo was overjoyed. On the side, Link was so envious that he tugged at Amon's sleeve and asked, "Ammonius, when can I also learn high-level magic?" Amon said with a faint smile, "Soon, when you have suffered a lot, it will be almost time. Leading the whole tribe to migrate is not an easy thing, it will depend on whether you can hold on or not. How is Elmar's calligraphy? I want to see it today." Link nodded and said, soon, it can write its own name." That afternoon, the 3 of them left the village and went to the pool where Elmar and the other ironbacks lived. Schrödinger seemed to be very interested in this matter and trotted behind to watch the fun. When they came to the pool, Amon called out, and the ironback jumped up, wagging its tail in a very affectionate manner, splashing water all over them. The 4 big ironbacks also emerged from the water and looked at Ammonius with great awe. Amon smiled and said, "Elmar, I heard that you can write your own name. From now on, you are no longer an ordinary beast king, but have mastered the wisdom of the world. Write it for me to see." Elmar nodded very obediently, stretched out a front paw and really wrote a line of words on the ground. Schrödinger, who had been looking at it with wide eyes, suddenly turned his head away and stopped looking. Madanzo also covered his mouth and laughed. Amon frowned and looked a little strange. He said to Link, "How did you teach it? Why did it write it backwards?" Link replied awkwardly, "I taught it correctly, maybe its eyes look different from mine." Amon was stunned for a long time, then suddenly gave Link a punch and said, "Did you stand opposite it when you wrote?" Link slapped his head. "Yes, I treated it like a human, I didn't expect it to be so stupid." Amon glared at him. "It's not Elmar that's stupid, look at how well it learns. It's not your fault, there's usually no chance to write in this mountain, no experience is no experience. You guys go out, I have a few words to say to Elmar alone." Link and Madanzo left the forest and waited on the mountain road outside. Not long after, Amon came out with Schrödinger. He said to Madanzo, "You have already achieved the 6th level of the power of 2 sides, now go and test out the strength of the Ironback King. I have already told Elmar to use whatever skills you have, don't hold anything back." Madanzo went in, and not long after, he heard roars from the depths of the forest. Waves splashed everywhere, mana surged, and countless broken branches flew out. After about the time of a meal, the movement finally stopped, and Madanzo came out of the forest in a sorry state. Amon asked with a smile, "How was it, who won and who lost?" Madanzo replied awkwardly, "Actually, if it was a one-on-one fight, I would be a little stronger than Elmar, but she had the help of 4 big ironbacks, so she was a little stronger than me." Amon frowned. "This sounds familiar, why is it exactly the same as what Link said?" Seeing Madanzo being defeated, Link laughed. "The reason is very simple, we were all taught by the same teacher." Amon glared at him again. "Don't you feel ashamed that Elmar is stronger than all of you? Her strength has improved a lot, and she will play a very important role in the future migration of our people. We will be leaving in half a month, order the people to quickly pack up, take what needs to be taken, and leave what we don't need." Just as Amon and Madanzo arrived in the town of Duk, Walter and Raphael also arrived in the Cape States and the city of Uruk respectively. Since the communication was cut off by the Great Flood, these 2 cities received messengers from the Hittite kingdom for the first time. They came to convey the greetings of the supreme mage Goliath and were received politely. Both had a secret letter, and it was stated that only the lord of the city could open it and read it alone. This letter brought unexpected trouble to both messengers. After reading Goliath's secret letter, Rod Dick sat alone in his room for a long time. He did not summon his subordinates, nor did he consult Julian, the deputy chief priest. He only invited his most trusted aide, Aristotle. He handed the letter to Aristotle and said, "Sir, I received a letter, but I don't know what to do with it. Should I give it to the pharaoh to deal with along with the letter, or should I pretend not to have read it at all?" Aristotle read the letter and did not speak for a long time. Finally, Rod Dick could not help but say, "You have always been my most trusted friend, so I will discuss it with you alone, hoping to hear your opinion." Aristotle mused, "It is indeed difficult to discuss such a letter in public. Goliath does not want to be your enemy, the 9th level supreme mage only told you about the future he foresaw and made a suggestion." Rod Dick sighed. "I have also heard of what is about to happen in the land of Marduk, but I am only the Lord of Cape. Although I do not want to see it, I am powerless to stop the disputes between states." Aristotle, "But Goliath wants to stop it, so he made such a suggestion. I am a person from afar, and from the point of view of a bystander, this supreme mage's compassion is admirable, as for whether it will succeed or not is another matter, at least he wants to do so." Rod Dick smiled bitterly. "I can't consider his suggestion, and I don't even want people to know that I have heard of it, but I don't want to offend Goliath either, so what do you think should be done?" Aristotle thought for a moment and replied, "Goliath also foresaw that a war between Hittite and Igut is about to break out, which I am afraid neither you nor he can stop. His suggestion can also be considered after the war, when the situation may be different, and there may not even be a need to consider his suggestion. You do not have to give any reply for the time being." Chapter 112. Talents come forth in large numbers. Dick nodded and asked, "What about the emissary called Raphael?" Aristotle smiled. Goliath also mentioned the city of Uruk. He also sent a messenger to Gilgamesh. Send a spy to find out how Gilgamesh treated the messenger. When Raphael arrived at the Cape States, he sent a secret letter to the city lord, but there was no reply. He was treated to good food and drinks every day, but his residence was heavily guarded. In name, it was for his safety, but in reality, he was under house arrest. When Walter arrived in Uruk, Gilgamesh and Enkidu had yet to return from their patrol. He waited in the inn for a few days. The two brothers who were usually in charge of receiving him were Abel and Cain. Both of them were nobles who had fallen from grace. When they were young, they had undergone a ritual to awaken their power. It was said that they had been practicing magic in the farmstead and had recently become advanced mages. Gilgamesh had praised them and promoted them to senior priests of the Uruk shrine. The governor praised them for their perseverance and willpower. Although their ancestral property had declined, they did not give up hope and hard work. Without any guidance or help, they practiced magic on their own and reached the intermediate level, which was enough to make many people feel ashamed. Promoting and putting these two brothers in an important position was also an example to encourage more talents to emerge in the city. The high priests of the Uruk shrine were also the high priests of the Uruk army. Lord Gilgamesh had recently been recruiting talents and strengthening the army. It seemed that he was preparing for war. In times of peace, it was always good to be prepared. However, the people of the city were rather puzzled. With the lord of the city and Lord Enkidu around, who would dare to invade Uruk city? Abel and Cain repeatedly asked Walter why he had come, but Walter only told them that Saya and Uruk had not been in contact for 2 years due to the flood. Therefore, Lord Goliath had sent a messenger to greet them, but he did not say much else. When Gilgamesh returned to the city, he summoned Walter. After reading the letter, he also did not say a word. He called Enkidu over and directly handed the letter to his most trusted brother. Enkidu read the letter and frowned. Goliath is really brave. He actually made such a suggestion. To be honest, I admire him. Gilgamesh laughed. There are not many people in the world that you admire. Goliath is indeed not simple, but I cannot answer his suggestion. My brother, what do you think we should do? Enkidu. I heard that the messenger, Walter, is a disciple of Goliath and is also the high priest of Saya. He does not know what kind of letter he has sent. Let's call him over and let him take a look at the letter. From the attitude of a student, he might be able to see what kind of person his teacher is. Gilgamesh ordered his men to invite Walter over. After exchanging some pleasantries, he dismissed all the servants, leaving only the 3 of them in the room. Gilgamesh smiled and asked, "Sir Warret, did you know the contents of the letter you sent me?" Walter shook his head and said, "My teacher, Sir Goliath, only wanted me to deliver the letter and let you open it. He did not tell me the contents." Enkidu handed the letter over. You've traveled thousands of miles through the desert and experienced many dangers just to deliver this letter. It's a pity that you don't know the contents of this letter. Take a good look. Walter shook his head again and said, "My teacher instructed me not to open the letter. There's no need to be curious." Gilgamesh, you didn't open the letter. Didn't you want my reply? I'll discuss the reply with you. Did Sir Goliath say that you are not allowed to discuss this letter with me? Warret said, "Not really." Enkidu, then take a look. Since that was the case, Walter took the letter calmly. As he read, his expression became more and more solemn. Gilgamesh's slender eyes narrowed as he stared at him and said, "Sir Messenger, you sent such a letter. How should I deal with it? In order to show my loyalty to the kingdom, should I send you along with this letter to the king of Babylon?" Walter raised his head and said, "I'm just a messenger. I don't know the contents of the letter. But now that I've seen it, I won't avoid the contents of the letter. My teacher has no intention of becoming enemies with you. He not only sees the gods, but also foresees an impending conflict and war. Whether it's the will of the gods or the greed of the people, my teacher wants to do his best to prevent a tragedy. This is something I respect. I understand his thoughts, and I await your reply." Gilgamesh nodded approvingly and said, "Aren't you afraid at all?" Walter smiled bitterly and said, "I'm very surprised and worried. But fear is useless because the letter has already been delivered. My lords, you are the revered heroes of the continent. You even dared to kill the gods. However, I would like to ask, what is the purpose of the two of you killing Humbaba? This letter is just a suggestion. You can either reject it or accept it. But why should you be afraid of such a suggestion? Since I dared to deliver it, why don't you read it?" Enkidu suddenly slammed the table. The table sank several inches deep into the stone tiles. He laughed and said, "Walter, you have guts to say such words in front of us. Whether we accept Goliath's suggestion or not, we won't make things difficult for you. I will personally escort you back to the border of Babylon." "My lord, what kind of reply do you want to give? We don't want to make things difficult for this messenger." Gilgamesh said, "I understand. Please tell Lord Goliath the truth." He thought for a moment and asked curiously, "Lord Walter, I heard that you are a 6th-level mage, is that right?" Walter nodded and replied, "Yes. When I came here, I was a 6th-level mage." Gilgamesh sighed with emotion. The age of strife is also the age of heroes. Recently, there have been many talented people on the continent. I heard that the holy guardian of the temple of Isis is the youngest supreme mage in the world. And in the Hittite kingdom, there is also a mage named Gakate who has just become a supreme mage. I didn't expect that the Hittite kingdom would also have a new supreme mage. Judging from his tone, Walter was sure that he would become a supreme mage. Walter wanted to say something but hesitated. He looked thoughtful but did not deny anything. Following Aristotle's advice, Rod-Dik sent a spy to Uruk to inquire about the other messenger, Walter. The spy then returned to the Cape States to report. It had been more than a month. Gilgamesh did not make things difficult for Walter. Enkidu even personally sent Walter to the border. When Rod-Dik heard the news, he also prepared to send Raphael back to his homeland. When Lord Julian heard that Saya had sent a messenger, he specially summoned Raphael and asked him about the situation after the flood. Raphael was very polite and answered as detailed as possible. Except for the secret letter that he himself had not read, he told the truth. Some time ago, Julian went to the capital of Iga and returned to Uruk to summon Walter. Then he went to Rod-Dik for a secret discussion. In the secret room, he said, "The Pharaoh has ordered us to prepare for the attack on the Hittite kingdom. The Cape States will be our outpost. In the next 6 months, there will be a continuous flow of war supplies to the Cape States through various means. We must make all preparations, but for the time being, we cannot alarm the Hittite kingdom." Rod-Dik sighed inwardly. What he had been worrying about was finally happening. He could not hide even if he wanted to. On the surface, he pretended to be puzzled and asked, "Why is the Cape States the base for the attack on the Hittite kingdom? It seems more convenient to go out to sea from the Nile River and directly land on land." Julian explained, 1 year later, the land route from the Cape States to Saya will be restored. The pharaoh naturally has his reasons for choosing this route. 2 years later, the area around the original town of Duk will become 1,000 miles of fertile land. That will be the new rich territory of the central part of the continent. The goal of the Pharaoh kingdom is to make the Hittite kingdom forever and thoroughly submit to him. Only by occupying that territory, can he intimidate the entire continent and establish a great achievement for the empire. Although Goliath's letter had already predicted this, but it was confirmed by Julian. Rod-Dik was still shocked. He frowned and asked, "Is this true?" Julian answered affirmatively, "Of course it is true. The elders of the Igut Academy of Magic have collectively made a prophecy. It is confirmed without a doubt." There was also an oracle in the shrine. Although the kingdom of Hittite had built shrines to Horus in various places, they did not lead their people to sincerely offer sacrifices. This kind of disrespectful behavior towards the gods was unforgivable. Therefore, this war is not only a war for the empire, it is also a war to protect the dignity of the king of Horus. Rod Dick's brows furrowed even deeper, approximately when? Julian said in a low voice, "This matter is still a top secret at the moment. Only the two of us are qualified to know." A war between nations required a lot of preparation. The mobilization of resources and troops could not be hidden from the eyes and ears of the spies, but it was better to delay the enemy's detection. Saya suddenly sent an emissary. "I saw him today. I'm afraid that he sent someone at this time to test the waters. It is indeed a wise move by the lord of the city to keep him under house arrest." Rod Dick smiled bitterly, "But I can't always keep this emissary in the inn. I was waiting for you to come back to discuss it." Arya smiled and said, "That's easy. Give him the best hospitality, give him the most expensive gifts, choose beautiful women to serve him well, and order people to take him on a tour around the city. Let him see a peaceful and tranquil scene. Then send someone to escort him across the desert back to his country. This way, the emissary will have nothing to say. In the name of escorting the emissary, we will also send a messenger with guards to visit and see the situation there." Raphael stayed in the Cape States for 2 months. Rod Dick's original hospitality was already very good, but after Lord Julian returned, everything became even better. He was simply a VIP among VIPs. Raphael was a great noble of the Hittite kingdom. He could go deep into the dangerous wilderness alone, but he was equally at ease with the wine and wealth of the world. It's not like he hadn't seen it before. 2 months of almost no travel was just what Raphael wanted. He was very tired from crossing the Saya Desert. This kind of fatigue was different from ordinary fatigue. As a mage, his magic was almost exhausted and his recovery was particularly slow. He was not sure that he could cross the dangerous Saya Desert again in a short period of time and return safely. So he decided to take a good rest. 2 months later, Rod Dick came to apologize to Raphael again, explaining that Supreme Mage Julian was not in the city for some time and was very busy with various things, so he neglected the emissary. During this time, he invited Raphael to travel around the city, see the customs of the foreign countries, and enjoy to his heart's content. If there was anything he liked or wanted, he could ask for it. After many days of fun in the Cape States, Raphael's magic was completely restored, but his strength continued to grow slowly. He was surprised and happy, but he did not say anything. Since the other party was so enthusiastic, he would enjoy it. He also asked to go out of the city and visit the mountains and countryside of the foreign countries. After this trip, almost a month had passed. At that time, when Raphael finally said goodbye and returned home, Rod Dick sent an emissary with a guard to visit him. This trip would be through dangerous deserts and swamps, and for the sake of safety, he could not let the noble Lord Raphael travel alone. As for Rod Dick's reply to the secret letter, there was no reply. Not to mention what the cities were busy with, was also busy recently. He led the savages out of the mountains and moved to a new home. There were more than 600 men, women, and children in Link's tribe. They also had a lot of daily necessities to bring. Large livestock were slaughtered for dry rations, and young animals were taken away to be raised. Such a team walking in the mountains was really dragging a family with them. When and Madanzo came, it only took them 5 days, but when they returned, it took them a full month, which exhausted Link. The mountain road was not easy to walk, but for the savages who had lived in the mountains since childhood, it was not a problem. They just had to carry a lot of things. The worst thing was that many roads were cut off, and there were many dammed lakes along the way. When they left the mountains, there were several areas of swamps that were completely impassable. At this time, the advantage of Elmar and the 4 ironbacks could be seen. They could carry heavy things across the water and swamps, especially in the muddy swamps. They were much more useful than carriages and boats. Gave the magical bone to Link and let him drive the invisible ship across the lakes and swamps to transport his people. The invisible space on the ship was very large, but it was quite difficult for Link to transport too many people at once. All the clansmen and livestock had to go back and forth several times to transport them all. On the water, the invisible ship did not encounter much resistance, but in the swamps, it was quite difficult to carry a ship full of people. Did not move, and Madanzo just watched the fun with a smirk on his face. Link had almost exhausted his magic power. When he reached the town of Duk, he was really exhausted. He lay there and rested for several days without moving. Madanzo ordered his people to set up a temporary camp and made arrangements for the future. They brought enough dry rations for a year, and they could also hunt in the nearby wilderness. Ventusalam prepared all kinds of seeds for all kinds of food and gave them to Link. He asked him to arrange for his people to sow the seeds in the next spring. He marked out various landmarks on the island and told Link which land and mines belonged to the descendants of Duk. They could choose other places to cultivate their own farms. Parangons and ores could be mined at the foot of the Saya Plateau in the north. Parangons were not the most important resource at the moment, but smelting iron ore required time. Whether it was farming tools or weapons, they were urgently needed. If they wanted to mine, they would have to cross a swamp. The 5 ironbacks were the best escorts. After this great migration, Link finally brought his people out of the mountains and built a home on fertile land. This exhausted clansman had quietly achieved the 6th level of the power of 2 sides. After setting up a simple camp, they needed to plan the future stronghold. The mine was also a quarry, and the strong men of the savages were excellent craftsmen. Did not need to worry about this, but he needed time. With Elmar, Link, and Madanzo here, the safety of the wilderness was temporarily guaranteed. Large-scale conflicts would not spread here for at least 1 or 2 years. After everything was settled, instructed Madanzo, "You stay here and help Link train warriors and teach them how to fight. They will be able to defend the homeland in future conflicts. When they have built a simple stronghold wall and the warriors have learned how to fight, you can leave here and find me in Montefiore. I need to go to Saya first. You stay here and help Link." Link and Madanzo said reluctantly, "You led us successfully through the trial. We have all become 6th-level sorcerers and warriors. What are you going to do now?" Replied, "The title deed of Duk was left by Moses in a secret place in Saya. I have to take it out first, just in case. I also need to study the terrain of the original charcoal forest and complete the task given to me by the Temple of Isis. I know you want to follow me, but the people here need you more. It is more convenient for me to go alone." The Ironback King Elmar carried through a large swamp and came to the edge of the charcoal forest. Said to Elmar, "You should go back too. This swamp can't stop me. But the people live on a huge island surrounded by mud. They need your help to get in and out. You should practice your strength well. Don't learn from those monsters and make trouble out of nothing. Protect this homeland." Elmar turned back reluctantly. Carried Schrödinger in his big leather bag and continued westward. The charcoal forest had completely changed. There were still strange black shrubs growing on the high rocks, but the lower parts had been submerged by mud and stagnant water. It was a swamp in the forest. Even a boat could not pass through, let alone on foot. But the charcoal forest could not stop the footsteps of the supreme sorcerers and supreme warriors. Some of the passages in the strange rocks were very narrow. Did not use the invisible boat and walked on foot with his staff. The muddy swamp and water were like solid ground under his feet. He walked with ease and calmness. Chapter 113. Unexpectedly, Murin appeared in the charcoal marsh. Amon bowed and asked, "Goddess, are you waiting for me here?" This was the first time he met her since escaping from the underworld. Murin smiled like a flower. "Don't call me goddess. My name is Yun Namna. Have you forgotten?" Amon was not stubborn. He stood up and said, "Yun Namna, are you waiting for me here?" Yun Namna smiled sweetly. "Amon, you really surprised me. When I sent people to the underworld to rescue you, I heard that you had escaped by yourself. My hero, can you tell me how you did it? Amon took out a scroll out of thin air. It was because of this that the gatekeeper of the underworld made way for me. I had two other scrolls at the time, the Information Annihilation, and the Space Turbulence. I used them both and luckily escaped from the underworld. Yun Namna covered her mouth with her hand in surprise. Tiamat's wrath is a relic of Nero. No wonder that coward didn't dare to block your way. In your staff, there is a spatial artifact, Ventusolve. You hid the scroll in it and brought it into the underworld. How clever. Amon nodded. Yes, this branch is my staff. You saw it on the Euphrates River. The parangons inlaid in it are indeed a spatial artifact. Inanna reached out and took Amon's iron staff. She caressed it and said in a slightly admiring tone, "What an exquisite staff. It should be the work of the most outstanding artificer. It's made of damask. The place where the parangons are inlaid is covered with a complete or core. If you don't pay attention, even the gods won't find it." She stretched out her slender fingers and opened the mechanisms on the staff one by one, revealing a corner of the Taraculus, Aquaticore, Ventuscule, and Flame Elf that were embedded in the body of the staff. She then praised, "What a precious staff. For a sorcerer to have such a staff is amazing. You seem a little nervous. Is there any secret in this staff that I don't know?" No matter how calm Amon was, he couldn't help but feel a little nervous. This staff contained many of his secrets. He could hide them from others, but not from Inanna. As long as he didn't use it, even the gods wouldn't notice. But Yun Namna had seen him use this staff. Yun Namna played with the staff like an adult studying a child's toy. She pondered with great interest for a long time and finally found the top of the staff. She touched it with her finger and opened the groove of the god's tear. It was empty. The god's tear had been put into the bone. The bone was now hidden under Amon's ribs. Like the cat in the bag, even the gods wouldn't find it if they didn't search Amon. Crazy Ol once said that one must have the power of advanced body arts and advanced magic at the same time to open the most hidden notch at the top of the staff. Needless to say, Yun Namna's magic was brilliant. But she didn't look like a warrior at all, yet she opened the groove with ease. In front of Amon, she had inadvertently revealed the secret of being a deity more or less. Amon was deep in thought. Yun Namna exclaimed again, "This groove is so hidden and interesting. I haven't found it even though I've been with you for so long. Is it to be inlaid with the god's tear? The maker of this staff is very ambitious. There's more information in the Taraculus. Amon, can I have a look?" Amon smiled bitterly. "If you really want to see it, can I refuse? Besides, you've already seen it. Why ask me?" Yun was a god. When he saw the information in the Taraculus, he read it in an instant. This was the magic of supreme message magic. As he spoke, Amon felt lucky. When he became a supreme sorcerer, he had read Crazy Ol's last message in the Taraculus. Crazy Ol's message was as follows, "My child, this is my last message to you. When you see it, you'll already be a supreme sorcerer. As long as you don't cause trouble, you can live a comfortable life, because you're already one of the strongest beings in the world. I've been through this, but I spent the rest of my life thinking about the meaning of existence. What's the essential difference between a creature like me, a stone on the ground, or a dog outside the door? Maybe this thinking itself is the meaning of existence. But the world is still the world. The stars are still flickering in the billions of years of life and death. When you feel noble in order to join the ranks of the strongest beings in the continent, people will indeed give you a noble status, so that you can get rid of the plight of a sorcerer. This is the lifelong pursuit of many people. But this is not our plight, nor is it my pursuit. I've been a sorcerer all my life. When you feel noble in the world, you often forget how small you are under the stars. All creatures will die. This is the great prophecy of the human world. This world doesn't really need anyone, because everyone will be gone, including you and me. So what is eternal? When I think, I seem to see the gods laughing. When I no longer exist, does the world exist for me? What's the meaning of the gods? Whether the laughing gods exist or not, whether they're idealistic or not, for me, the gods are dead. But Amon, you're still alive. I hope you can prove an answer, but I don't want you to become another bear. When you become a supreme sorcerer, you'll have unprecedented power. This power melts into your body and mind as if you were born with it. But one day you may face a dilemma: is everything you have you? If so, who is the person who also has everything? Why are you you? If you lose everything, will you also lose yourself? This is my last hint to you. I'm sorry I can't teach you more. Good luck, my child. Nietzsche's last message was a series of questions and thoughts, without any specific training. When Amon read it, the message disappeared automatically. There were only 2 permanent magic messages left in the Taraculus. The first was the scene of Amon kneeling in front of Crazy Ol, and the second was a line of Igut written on the wall: Amon, my name is Eco. These were the 2 messages that Yun Namna saw. She smiled and said, I accidentally peeped into your privacy, but I'm your guardian. It's okay. Then she activated the wand, and a light and shadow appeared in the swamp. It was the scene of Amon kneeling in front of Crazy Ol. The goddess asked again, this man is the oldest living miner in Duk. He's also a sorcerer. So you learned magic from him. Is this wand also made by him? Amon told the truth. Yes, you're right. Yun Namna returned the wand to Amon. Amon conveniently restored all the open mechanisms to their original state. This inadvertent movement also exposed his secret. Yun Namna was surprised. Whether to open or close the hidden mechanism at the top of the wand, it requires at least the strength of the advanced level of body arts. I can see that you're already a supreme sorcerer. It's not uncommon for a supreme warrior to learn magic through the second awakening of power, but a supreme sorcerer who has gone through the second awakening of power and practiced hard body arts from the beginning can achieve the intermediate level. Apart from Gilgamesh, I seem to have only seen you. This was a very natural misunderstanding, and it also revealed something that many people were not clear about. It was well known that if a supreme warrior successfully went through the second awakening of strength, he could learn the intermediate and low-level magic. But in theory, a supreme mage could also go through the second awakening of strength. If he succeeded in awakening the power in his blood, he could also learn the intermediate and low-level body arts. But no supreme mage had ever heard of such a thing. The simplest reason was that mages had mastered magical powers beyond the knowledge of ordinary people, so there was no need and no desire to do so. For example, a person could easily fly on a heavy object, so naturally he would not walk on foot while carrying a small load. This was a natural change from ability to state of mind. There were also many other reasons. For example, the status of secular mages was far nobler than that of ordinary warriors. Mages had neither the need nor the disdain to practice body arts. Moreover, the practice of body arts was another kind of hard test that needed to be withstood by the muscles and bones. Otherwise, it would be impossible to make a breakthrough. Many supreme mages were already very old and had a high status, so it was impossible for them to start from the most difficult low-level body arts. Even if they did start, their achievements would be limited. The practice of magic itself would consume a lifetime of energy. Even a supreme mage would find it difficult to master all the esoteric high-level magic. Therefore, no supreme mage would go through the second awakening of strength and waste unnecessary energy to start from the most basic level of body arts. There was still a long way to go before they could finish learning the high-level magic. Over time, many people had the misconception that the second awakening of power was only for samurai. But today, Inanna revealed Gilgamesh's secret. The governor of the city was a supreme mage, but he had gone through the second awakening of strength and started practicing body arts from scratch. After passing many tests, he had reached the advanced level. Amon asked with great interest, "Oh, what level of mage and warrior is Gilgamesh?" Gilgamesh's level of practice was his secret. He usually did not want to be mentioned, but Yun Namna casually told Amon, he is a 9th level supreme mage and has also achieved the 6th level of body arts. You are also a supreme mage and a 6th level warrior, right? You are much cuter than him. That arrogant man does not even care about the gods. Unfortunately, he is not a god after all. Amon thought of another person. Crazy old student, Bear, was also a 9th level mage. In order to explore the secrets of the gods, he practiced body arts from scratch and eventually became a 6th level warrior. Bear's situation was different from Gilgamesh's. He did not go through the second awakening of strength, but directly practiced the power of 2 sides. Chapter 114. Amon didn't want to talk about power training anymore. He was afraid that he would miss something if he talked too much. So he changed the topic and asked, I heard that only living materials can be made into staffs, but this staff is made of damask steel. What's going on? Yun Namna asked in reply, didn't the person who made the staff tell you? Amon shook his head and said, he's gone. He died in the flood. Yun Namna replied, there's only one way to make a staff out of lifeless materials. It's like nourishing it with one's own blood. Only then can it be made into a staff. Many of the most precious artifacts need to be made in the same way. Making a staff out of damask steel is also a warrior's weapon. It's most suitable for mages who practice body arts like you. It's rare for mages to reawaken the power in their blood and practice body arts, but you're a minor from Duk, so it's not too surprising that you can do this. Amon, you really give me too many surprises. I'm waiting for you here because another goddess is looking for you. She heard everything we said. Amon was taken aback. Why was there another goddess looking for him? At this moment, he suddenly sensed a strong aura behind him. He quickly turned around and saw a woman standing in the swamp. Of course, it was impossible to tell the age of the goddess. She looked to be in her 20s, dressed in a light white dress, and her feet were bare but not stained by the mud. She appeared on the path that Amon walked on, and Amon didn't notice her at all. The goddess looked extremely beautiful. Her facial features, figure, and skin were almost flawless. Her dress was very well-fitting, as if it was a natural part of her body. There wasn't even a trace of it being cut. She wore a wreath of twigs on her head, and on the twigs, there were 5 white roses with pink stamens. The goddess, however, had a look of resentment in her eyes. She glanced at Amon and said to Inanna, Murin, did you send Dums to the underworld just to exchange for this mortal from Kella? Yun Namna did not reply. Instead, she turned to Amon and said, let me introduce you. This is Goddess Peloponnes. She thought that I sent my ex-husband Dums to the underworld in exchange for you. She wanted to save Dums, so she came to find you, intending to send you back to the underworld in exchange for Dums. I heard the news, so I specifically waited here. Amon, what do you think about this? Should I send you to the underworld in exchange for my ex-husband? The queen of the underworld detained Amon and asked Yun Namna to exchange for a man she loved. Amon knew about this, but he dared not expect Yun Namna to really do so. It was he who asked Yun Namna to take him to the underworld, and it was his own behavior that angered the queen of the underworld. Of course, he had to bear the consequences, so he made a prompt decision to escape without hesitation. Amon never thought that Yun Namna would send her ex-husband, Dums, to the underworld in exchange for him. How could he repay such a great favor? He had read many books about the gods in the temple of Isis, and he knew the names of Dums and Peloponnes. In the myths of the world, they were a pair of brother and sister. The relationship between the gods might be different from the understanding of mortals, but the relationship between these two gods was definitely not ordinary. They might even be blood-related siblings. Otherwise, Peloponnes would not have gone to rescue Dums. Peloponnes should have come to capture Amon and send him to the underworld, but Yun Namna just happened to appear and stop her. How did he get involved in the love and hate entanglement between the gods? Amon couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat. He hurriedly bowed to Peloponnes and said, Goddess, it was I who requested to enter the underworld, and I also left the underworld on my own accord. I bear the consequences of my own actions, and I have never asked anyone to exchange for me. As for the matter with Dums, I did not know about it, and I had already left the underworld at that time. I am just a mortal, and I do not understand the grudges between the gods. Peloponnes finally looked at Ammon. When she glanced at Ammon just now, it was no different from looking at a stone or a tree. Although she came to look for Ammon, she only spoke to Yun-Namna. At this moment, she revealed a slightly surprised expression and said, Ammon, you can still speak so calmly in front of the two goddesses. You claim to be a mortal, but it seems that you do not regard yourself as a mortal. Ammon replied humbly, Goddess, you have misunderstood. I am just saying what I should say, no matter who I am in front of. And as a god, you must understand the truth of the world, which is contained in the glory of divinity, so you are respected by the world. Peloponnes stared at Ammon, as if she had been trying to see through his heart, and slowly said, I saw the scene of you using magic to pass through the swamp just now. You are already a great sorcerer at such a young age, and like Gargamesh, you actually practice body arts. With the ability to escape from the underworld, it is no wonder that Murin would like you. Although she can like any man, why would she send her husband to the underworld in exchange for you? There is no such reason in the world. It really doesn't make sense. It seems that the ballad Gilgamesh sang was not bad. Ammon and Yun-Namna had not done anything yet, but this kind of trouble had already arisen. But he could not blame Yun-Namna for anything. He could only explain with a wry smile, my escape from the underworld has nothing to do with Dums. If he really went to exchange for me, and Queen Kella could not hand him over, she should have let him go. You should have gone to Kella to reason with her, shouldn't you? As for this matter, it is the first time I have heard of it. Yun-Namna, why did you do this? Yun-Namna sneered and waved her sleeves, see for yourselves. A mirage-like light and shadow appeared in mid-air, and Ammon saw two people sitting in a gorgeous hall. A beautiful girl was standing in the middle of the hall, swaying and dancing. Her gauze-like blouse just happened to cover the highest part of her chest, and the tempting balls of her breasts were faintly discernible. Around her bare waist and abdomen was a gold chain with a teardrop-shaped pendant hanging from it. The pendant kept slapping against her raised buttocks, making a pleasant tinkling sound. There was a reclining chair in the front of the hall, and a man was half lying on it. He was holding a glass of wine in his hand and looking at the girl in front of him with great enjoyment. At this time, Yun-Namna suddenly shouted, Shubra, Dums, what are you doing? Then the girl knelt on the ground and explained with tears in her eyes, it is your husband Dums who said that you went to the underworld, and your sister will not let you come back. He asked me to offer an erotic dance and serve him sincerely, and he will find a way to save you. After the light and shadow disappeared in mid-air, Peloponnes let out a sigh and said after a while, Murin, Dums is your husband after all. Yun-Namna snorted coldly, he was, but do you want such a husband? What's more, he married a deity, so he has to bear the punishment of betrayal. Peloponnes thought for a while and said, you are the goddess of youth and love, so of course you always live in your so-called love. If you think that Dums' behavior is a betrayal that must be punished, it is not impossible, but what about yourself? You have also fallen in love with all kinds of men, why not punish yourself for your betrayal? Among the men you've loved before, my younger brother, the handsome Temuzid, and that mighty and majestic Lion King, who hasn't been hurt. Who can tolerate your love and heartlessness? What kind of punishment should you receive for the harm you have done to this love? Goddess of youth and love, if you cannot answer my question, you will lose the transcendent power bestowed by divinity. Did Yun-Namna have so many stories? Ammon was also very curious as he waited for her to answer. Yun-Namna replied without changing her expression, anyone can choose to love or not to love. The people I have fallen in love with have never been true deities. Only my husband Dums has the possibility of becoming a deity, but he has never been able to understand the true path. Are they the ones who have been hurt? No, you are wrong. You should look at everything from the perspective of the world. Every time the person who has been hurt, it seems that it is the person I love. There is only one reason, because I am a powerful deity. If I were an ordinary woman in the mortal world, only possessing youth and beauty but not the power of a deity, what would happen to me? The person who has been hurt countless times can only be me. For example, your brother Dums, if I were not a deity or his wife, then I would be weeping in the dark underworld now, while he forced my maid to sacrifice herself to him in the name of saving me. His betrayal is not about love or not love, or who he fell in love with, but about forcing a woman who does not love him to give herself to him in the name of loving me. Goddess Peloponnes, why can't you have your own divine realm? It is because you can't fully understand why a deity is a deity. You think that you look at everything from the perspective of a deity, but you have not really understood the so-called source of divinity. The punishment I gave to Dums was the fate he gave me in his human nature choice. This long speech was a goddess answering another goddess's question, and it contained a lot of information about the deities. For example, Peloponnes said to Numna, if you can't answer my question, you will lose the transcendental power bestowed by divinity. And Numna said to Peloponnes, why can't you have your own divine realm? It is because you can't fully understand why a deity is a deity. Ammon seemed to understand something, but he could not fully understand it. Perhaps when he became a deity in the future, this information would be very important. In the face of Numna's sharp retort, Peloponnes's expression became more and more solemn. She also sneered and said, Goddess of youth and love, your answer is not wrong, but the person you love is always reincarnating in a tragic fate, and this is not the glory that a deity should have. In this case, even if you have a divine realm, you will never be able to truly integrate it, unless this curse can be broken. Numna, this is my business, I have been looking for it, you don't have to worry about it. Peloponnes, I don't want to worry about you, I just want to save Dums. Chapter 115. Numna turned sideways and naturally and intimately took one of Ammon's arms, just like when they used to stroll on the grasslands, half of her soft body pressed against him, and said with a smile, My Ammon, if you have something to say, say it, I'm very willing to listen. Ammon cleared his throat and said, What you said just now is very reasonable, although there are many parts one still don't understand, I understand. Murin has her own reasons for punishing Dums, and she has already done so. And Goddess Peloponnes, if you want to save Dums from the underworld, then you should go to the queen of the underworld, Kella. I don't know about this matter, and I escaped the underworld on my own. If you want to exchange me for Dums, it will only backfire, because Queen Kella's condition is to exchange someone like Dums for me. If I am not there, there is no way to exchange, and if I go, it will be nothing more than a second time escaping from the underworld and leaving Dums behind forever. Because I have already escaped, you can go to the underworld to find Queen Kella and persuade her to release Dums if she can't hand over Dums. I know that the queen of the underworld is very difficult to talk to, but things can always be discussed, you are both gods. It is best for Goddess Peloponnes to go by yourself, I can see that the relationship between Murin and her sister doesn't seem to be very good. Numna smiled and said, Ammon, you have made things very clear, and we two gods have gone off topic. But don't call me Murin, call me Numna, didn't we agree? Ammon smiled bitterly and said, When I call you goddess, I am more used to calling you Murin. Peloponnes looked at the intimacy between the two and was very displeased. She said lightly, Ammon, your words are very reasonable, you actually have the guts to advise the gods what to do. Ammon took Numna and bowed slightly, I was just talking about my opinion on a matter, I did not ask the goddess to do anything. Peloponnes turned around and said, You two slowly make out, I will go to the underworld to find Kella. As she spoke, her figure slowly disappeared into the fog above the swamp. Numna huffed and said in Ammon's ear, She let us slowly make out, Peloponnes said this is an oracle. When she mentioned the word oracle, there was obviously a sense of ridicule, but her tone and movements were clearly full of desire and temptation, making Ammon's ears and half of his body itch. Just then, Peloponnes, who had disappeared, suddenly appeared again, looked at Ammon with a faint smile and said, Young mortal, I want to remind you that Murin has a fate that she cannot escape, whether you believe it or not, look at the final fate of the men she loves. Not to mention others, a few years ago, she pursued Gilgamesh but was rejected, I think you know why. But Enkidu took a fancy to her and has always wanted to pursue the goddess of youth and love. Think about what will happen to you when you face Enkidu. Thank you for your advice, so I give you this advice. After saying this, Peloponnes disappeared again. Ammon could not help but feel a little tense. Yun Nam Na was indeed not easy to deal with. He did not do anything, but he had provoked the continent's #1 warrior, Enkidu, for no reason. He remembered the last time in the suburbs of Uruk, Enkidu had personally said that if they met again, he might kill him, and his tone did not seem to be joking. Yun Nam Na keenly sensed the subtle changes in Ammon. She released her hand and looked at him faintly and said, Ammon, are you afraid of Enkidu? No matter how strong he is, how can he be a match for a god? I am your guardian. Ammon shook his head and said, it's meaningless to talk about fear. I have even broken into the underworld, let alone a warrior. So what if I am not a match for him? It is his right to choose who he likes. There is no hatred between us, and I have no intention of provoking him. Yun Nam Na showed a pitiful look again and asked, then are you afraid of me? Ammon shook his head again, I have never been afraid of you. When we first met, I mistook you for a shepherdess. You took me to a strange town and gave me the best cake in the world. I just wanted to help you. Yun Nam Na laughed again, you mistook me for Princess Sisela and went to save me with so many people. In the end, you were all fooled by Princess Sisela. Ammon also laughed, after that incident, I finally know who you are. I am also very grateful that you agreed to take me to the underworld to say goodbye to my father's soul. Since you've done it, I'll keep my promise and do my best to repay you. I forgot to tell you, I found the descendants of Duk on Mount Horeb in Igut and stayed in Igut for a long time. Why haven't I heard from you? Yun Nam Na gently touched the back of his hand with her finger and said, that is the realm of the Ennead in Igut, it is a little inconvenient for me to go there. Besides, you have been hiding in the temple of Isis, it is even more difficult for me to find you. I also want to thank you, it is because you brought people back to Duk that I can return here smoothly and look forward to rebuilding my realm. Ammon asked, not fully understanding, is it because I am back that you can come back? Besides coming to persuade the goddess Peloponnes, is there anything else you want to do today? Yun Nam Na looked at him with her cherry lips pouted, you are really resourceful, leading the caveman tribe to build a stronghold first. But haven't you forgotten one thing? You promised me that you would guide them to rebuild my shrine. Ammon smiled, Yun Nam Na, rebuilding the shrine is not a problem, but it is just a magnificent and luxurious hall and courtyard. When there is time, it can be built with a single order. Although I am not a god, I also vaguely know that a shrine does not mean a realm. The original town of Duk also had a shrine of Horus, but that was only an order of the kingdom to show submission, but no one really believed in it and worshipped it. Those cavemen have never even heard of Murin, and you have not given them real help and shelter. Even if I build a shrine, I am afraid they do not have faith from the heart, and do not understand the true spirit of divinity. Yun Nam Na shook his arm, looking like a spoiled little girl, I know these things better than you do. When I heard the news that Peloponnes was coming to find you in the Saya Plateau, I immediately came, not only for the goddess, but also for us. As a god, I want to show a miracle to the people of Duk, and also give them a gift. This is the beginning of my rebuilding of the realm. Ammon asked in surprise, what miracle are you going to show, and what gift are you going to give to the cavemen? Yun Nam Na replied, wealth, magical and amazing wealth. The only relic in Duk is the foundation of my shrine, buried deep in the ground. There is a hidden cellar there, guarded by a magic array I personally set up. For hundreds of years, every high priest would receive my guidance on how to allow their souls to escape the imprisonment of Hades after they passed away. They will also put a batch of precious parangons in the most secret cellar, which can only be put in but not taken out. Mayor Dusty is an exception, so he does not know about it. I will send down an oracle to guide the people who arrive there to dig out the cellar and hold a ritual to open it. Aman said thoughtfully, that's a good idea. It seems that you have been prepared for a long time. But in this isolated wilderness, wealth doesn't mean much. Money can't buy anything. Yun Namna smiled, who said wealth does not mean much. They cannot be isolated from the world forever. This place is about to become 1,000 miles of fertile land. The first to arrive will be countless explorers, most of them in pursuit of the mysterious and unknown wealth. With such an amazing secret wealth in hand, they can hire wandering warriors, recruit craftsmen from all over the continent, and even have caravans send a steady stream of supplies. Otherwise, with the hard work of a few hundred people, when will they be able to build a magnificent city-state and kingdom? Aman pondered, this wealth should be used slowly. We can't let people know about it all at once. Otherwise, it may attract looters and robbers. Yun Namna smiled, with a supreme sorcerer like you and a portable spatial artifact, what kind of robber can rob it? This is the wealth that the gods have given to their believers to help them build a home and kingdom. If anyone dares to rob it, they will offend me. I don't mind directly punishing them, but it is better to be careful. Aman thought for a while and asked again, Yun Namna, you have so much private money. According to you, the wealth of Duk is offered by every chief priest. Is it also the inheritance of the descendants of Duk? Yun Namna shook her head and smiled, yes and no. It has been offered to the gods, so it belongs to me. I will use it to rebuild the realm. For the people living here, it is like rebuilding their home. The descendants of Duk will also live in this home, isn't it? The wealth of the mortal world is both meaningless and meaningful to the gods. This is the reason. Aman nodded. All right, let's do it this way. It's good for everyone and it's as you wish. Yun Namna's body leaned against Aman again. She held Aman's arm in her arms and said very intimately, Aman, I have another surprise for you. Aman was surprised, what surprise? You have done a lot. In fact, I don't have any more extravagant requests. Yun Namna said, when I arrived here, I happened to see you leaving the cavemen. Among them was the warrior named Madanzo. They all call you Ammonius. They respect you from the bottom of their hearts. It seems that you have done more for them than the real gods. In this case, in the future, I can also worship your statue in my shrine. We can receive sacrifices together. Aman was shocked, how is this possible? I am not a god. Yun Namna's smile was a little mysterious. Many gods in the world, when they first received sacrifices, they were not real gods. They were just human heroes. Aman's expression became serious. Yun Namna, are you trying to tell me that a mortal can also become a god? He finally asked the question that Crazy Ol had been wanting to verify all his life, and he was looking forward to the real answer. It was a puzzle that could make people ponder for a lifetime, but it was so easy to get the answer. Yun Namna put her cheek on Aman's shoulder and said softly, yes, a mortal can also become a god. This is a secret, you can't talk about it, or you will be hostile to the gods. Aman frowned, hostile to the gods. But you told me. Yun Namna raised her head and looked at him affectionately, because you have a chance to qualify, I will possibly extradite you to the Anunnaki divine clan. But whether you can pass the tests or not depends on yourself. You are a minor in Duk, not only a supreme sorcerer, but also a 6th-level warrior at such a young age, there should be hope. The answer to how to become a god was right in front of him, but he did not expect it to come so suddenly. Although Aman already knew in his heart that the path to godhood was included in the training of the body and mind of the two sides, he had not explored and confirmed the path after all. It was most convenient to have the guidance of a god. He coughed and asked again, so what do I need to do to become a real god? Yun Namna reached out and gently pushed his chest. My Aman, don't worry, these are all things in the future. To be qualified to join a certain divine clan and know how to become a god, you need to be recognized by the divine clan and make an oath, and I can only tell you when that day comes. Then she winked a little playfully and said, Amon, if there really comes a day when I extradite you to the Anunnaki divine clan, maybe the myths of the world will say that you are my son or husband. Amon's back was a little tight again. He could not help but think of Yun Nam Na's ex-husband, who was still hiding in the underworld. He subconsciously reached out and rubbed his nose with a wry smile. I more or less understand the relationship between the gods. The myths of the world are only interpreted in a way that people understand themselves. Yun Nam Na seemed to know what he was thinking, and she reached out and stroked his chest. My Amon, I just heard Peloponnes talk about my destiny, and I look forward to you helping me break this curse, so that I can become the well-deserved goddess of youth and love. Then, you will also obtain the secret of becoming a god. She put her hand on his chest, and her whole body exuded an indescribable charm of gentleness. But for Amon, the real irresistible temptation in the world was not wealth and beauty, but the secret of becoming a god. This was the goal that he had been pursuing for a long time and the doubt that he was looking forward to solving. Amon grabbed Yun Nam Na's hand, composed himself, and said softly, What do you want me to do? Yun Nam Na murmured, You are already doing it. As long as you can help me rebuild this divine realm, you will be qualified to be introduced into the Anunnaki divine clan. At that time, you only need to make an oath to the gods, obtain the secret of becoming a god, and accept the sacrifices of the world with me in the shrine. I am looking forward to this beautiful future, which is also my liberation and transcendence. Amon held her hand and said, Although I don't quite understand your so-called liberation and transcendence, I will try my best to help you. If there is such a day, and I can't make an oath that I don't want to, I hope you can understand. Chapter 116. Link and the other cavemen who arrived at the town of Duk all had the same dream that night. Those who did not fall asleep also seemed to have a dream. Even Elmar, the king of the Ironbacks, was no exception. In the dream, a radiant goddess appeared. She wore a long dress that flickered with golden starlight. Her figure was dainty and her face was moving. She held an ivy staff in her hand. She claimed to be the guardian of this place, Murin, and gave an oracle. The goddess would bless the people who arrived here to build their homes. A magical and amazing wealth would be given to them to build a city-state. The messenger of the goddess, Amon, would guide them to the buried wealth and hold a sacrificial ceremony to open the treasure. The things left behind by Murin could not only be used to build all kinds of magical instruments, but also to hire wandering warriors, craftsmen from all over the continent, and caravans from all over the world. This wealth would be kept and used by Amon. The cavemen who had just walked out of the mountains suddenly dreamed of such a goddess. They all felt it was incredible. But when they heard the name of Amon and saw their Amon holding Murin's arm intimately, they believed in the oracle. After dawn, Link gathered his people and held a prayer ceremony. They put up an altar and offered sacrifices to thank Amon and Murin. Interestingly, when these cavemen prayed, they put the name of Amon before the name of Murin. They naturally did so. In the dream, they saw Amon holding Murin, and he was half a head taller than Murin. Originally, Link and the others only worshipped a fire in the cave. Later, Amon became their only god, and there was also a cat who was the god's messenger. Now they offered sacrifices to Murin, not only because of the blessing in the oracle, but more importantly because of Amon. All the people were eagerly looking forward to the return of Amon, so that the prophecy in the dream would come true. Of course, Madanzo also participated in the prayer ceremony. While praying, he marveled in his heart, Ammonius, Ammonius, you are really amazing. When did you hold such a goddess in your arms? There is nothing you can't do. Madanzo had always known that Amon was not a real god. When he first met him, Amon was just a child who had not yet grown up, but he mastered magic and saved Madanzo's life. At first, Madanzo called him Ammonius, on the one hand, to learn magic, and on the other hand, to follow Link's lead. But later, Amon taught Madanzo the power of two sides step by step, making him a 6th-level magician and a 6th-level warrior at the same time. This was an incredible miracle in any country on the continent. Thinking back to Link's words, "You are my only god," Madanzo also said it without hesitation. When he passed the test of firm faith, he had already regarded Amon as a god. Who said that gods were statues in the temple and not living people? Madanzo would rather a real god like Amon, at least more real than the statues in the temple. Leaving Link and Madanzo's expectations aside, Amon carried his staff through the charcoal forest and finally saw the high wall of Saya in the distance. He grew up in the territory of Saya and traveled to so many places on the continent, but today was the first time he came to the main city of Saya. Yu Numna did not follow Amon to Saya. The two parted at the edge of the charcoal forest. Before leaving, the goddess asked with a faint smile, "Amon, who is Iko?" Obviously, she also saw another message left in the Taraculus. Amon replied, "An old friend, she came to Duk." Yu Numna playfully reached out and touched the tip of his nose. "She is a girl, isn't she? Is she unforgettable to you? The youth and life of mortals will eventually pass away, and any moment of forgetfulness is a treasure of remembrance. I will keep this message for you, maybe one day you will erase it yourself. Let me tell you a secret, Peloponnes laughed that the men I fell in love with all had no good ending, just because I fell in love with him. Whether she loved me or not, she was wrong." Amon did not want to talk about this topic, but he had to ask, what did she do wrong? Yu Numna, mortals all have birth, old age, sickness, and death. In the eyes of a god, of course, there is no good ending. What is the curse that haunts me? I have been thinking about it. Is it because the man I fell in love with cannot live forever, or does he need to have no regrets in his life? When walking into Saya, Amon was also thinking about this question. Did the amorous Yu Numna really fall in love with him? Not necessarily. She had feelings for him, and she definitely wanted to use and seduce him, but Amon did not dislike it. Yu Numna helped him and did not harm him. Even when he fell into the underworld, it was his own choice. As for guiding the descendants of Duk back to their homeland, it was also Amon's own wish. Maybe Yu Numna was just solving a puzzle. It seemed that gods also had their own troubles. The security of Saya was not strict. Without any interrogation, Amon easily entered the city. Located on the southeast edge of the Hittite Empire, Saya was originally an important border town and an important production area of fine iron and parangons. But since the flood cut off the land transportation with the neighboring countries, Saya had been peaceful for the past few years. People seemed to be leisurely and lazy. Amon came to Saya for two purposes. One was to retrieve the title deed of Duk, and the other was to see Goliath. When Moses was forced to leave, the title deed of Duk was still hidden somewhere in the city. He did not tell the envoy of the temple of Isis, Amon, but he told the Allah, who appeared as a god. In Crazy Ol's message, he specifically mentioned Goliath. He hoped that Amon must see Goliath when he had the chance, and he was very sure that even if Goliath did not help him, he would not make things difficult for him. Now Amon knew that when he was sent to Duk to avoid an impending disaster, it was also Goliath who privately instructed Mayor Dusty to do so. A supreme mage went all the way to Duk for the sake of a small minor. This was not a small favor. When he came to Saya, he found out that the situation was not what it used to be. No matter who mentioned Goliath, there was a look of reverence on their face. If anyone said anything disrespectful to Lord Goliath, they might be beaten. Goliath was now a 9th-level supreme mage, but he still stayed in the city as the chief priest. In Saya, his status was equivalent to that of a god without a title. A word from Goliath might be more effective in Saya than the Oracle of Enril, but the people here would not cross the line and call Goliath a god. In recent years, Goliath had hardly shown up. It was said that he only concentrated on practicing magic in the shrine. The affairs of the city were handled by Governor Shao Mo, his disciples Walter and Raphael, the 3 high priests, and various officials. There were not many things to do here. People lived and worked in peace and contentment. It was not easy to see Goliath, and Amon's identity was sensitive. The Hittite kingdom had ordered him to be beheaded and sent an emissary from the capital, but this order was not carried out in the end because he had been sent by Duk to carry out another decree. Now that he was back, there were still some things that had to be dealt with. Under the name of Allah, Aman met Goliath's disciples Walter and Raphael in the desert. The two high priests had warmly invited him to visit Saya. If he wanted to see Goliath, he could go through this channel. Aman also heard something else that slightly surprised him. Walter had returned from Uruk. Before he left, he was a 6th level mage. When he came back, he had advanced to the 7th level. The people of the city were overjoyed. They thought it was the glory of the city and a symbol of the god's blessing. They admired Walter's teacher, Goliath, even more. It seemed that there was more than one young genius on the continent. Aman had just become a supreme sorcerer, and Walter had also achieved the 7th level. Before that, the adoratress of the Temple of Isis, Maria, had become a supreme mage. Hearing that Raphael had not yet returned from his visit to the Cape States, Aman was not in a hurry to find Walter. He first went to get the title deed. The title deed of Duk was hidden in a place that everyone could see but no one would think of. It was in the manor that Mayor Dusty bought. Aman also bought a manor in Montefiore. There was a private shrine in the backyard, originally dedicated to Horus, but he replaced the statue with the goddess Batet. Dusty's manor was much larger, and there was also a small shrine dedicated to Enlil in the backyard. After Moses and the others left, this luxurious manor was occupied by a group of vagrants in the vicinity, and every courtyard was occupied by people. They claimed that their relatives and friends were killed or injured in the conflict, and this residence was the compensation that Moses and the other Duk miners should give. Governor Shao Mo was not easy to manage, so the past 2 years were peaceful. But no one dared to occupy the shrine in the backyard. After all, they could not blaspheme the gods, so it was left there alone. The title deed was in the pedestal at the foot of the statue of Enlil. There was a stone slab at the bottom of the statue that was connected to Enlil's foot. Even if it was lifted up, there would be no trace of it being hollowed out and closed again. Aman climbed over the wall and entered the backyard of the manor. He was already a supreme warrior and a supreme sorcerer. He was agile and good at hiding his tracks, so it was impossible for people to find him. He carried his staff and quietly went to the shrine. No one had been here for a long time. The altar was empty. There were neither offerings nor lamps. The statue of Enlil stood quietly in the darkness. Aman stretched out his staff and pointed at the statue. The life-sized statue floated in the air. He mumbled an incantation and a square crack appeared at the base of the statue. A stone slab floated down with a pile of things on it. It turned out that there was a hole in the base. Aman waved his hand and put the pile of things into the ventuculum. He pressed his staff down, and the statue fell down and returned to its original state. Hidden in the base of the statue were all the title deed of Duk, a special parangan and 20 gold coins. This should be the work of Mayor Dusty. He was really thoughtful. Even if this place was demolished, people would not dare to destroy the statue of Enlil. Instead, they would move the statue elsewhere so that the things hidden inside would not be discovered. Only Moses knew this secret. In addition to the title deed, there was also money. The parangan was the most precious of the special parangons, the ventuculum. It was worth 500 ordinary parangons, which was a huge fortune. As for the other 20 gold coins, it was even more thoughtful. The ventuculum could not be easily exchanged for cash, and the gold coins could be easily exchanged for pocket money in the market. Even if the descendants fell, they could live comfortably for the rest of their lives with this inheritance. Aman had been to many shrines, but the feeling was different. In some shrines, the solemn statue seemed to have a mysterious life, watching the people kneeling in worship. It was interesting to say that in order to make Schrödinger happy, Aman erected a statue of the cat goddess Batet in his manor. The feeling was the strongest there. The statue seemed to be alive, and one could vaguely feel a kind of gaze when walking in. However, there was no such feeling in this temple. The statue of the great god Enlil was just a cold stone. Amon took the things and turned to walk out of the shrine. At the threshold, he suddenly turned back and said something as if he was talking to himself. Enlil, great god, your eyes do not look here. The people of Duk offered the last of their wealth at your feet in an attempt to get protection, but were forced to go far away to be enslaved by a foreign country. Today I come to take it, and it will no longer belong to you. This is not a betrayal, but your choice to give up on Enlil. We have nothing more to ask of you. I take the inheritance of Duk and bid you farewell. When Amon said these words, he did not know the cause of the great flood that destroyed Duk, nor did he know that crazy old died in the challenge to Enlil. The only person in the world who knew this secret was Goliath, whom he wanted to see. When Amon entered the manor to take the title deed of Duk, in a secret room in the shrine of Saya Enlil, Goliath was watching a piece of information recorded by Walter. It was the scene of Walter and Amon's encounter with the Scorpion King in the desert. There was a paragraph that Goliath watched over and over again, and he was silent for a long time. The voices of the Scorpion King and Amon sounded over and over again. If I break the oath, I will never be a true god. If I break the oath, I will always be a lowly human in your eyes. After a long time, Walter asked carefully, my dear teacher, why are you not speaking? On behalf of Saya, I made a covenant and oath with the Scorpion King. Did I do something wrong? Did I go against your teachings? Goliath shook his head and said, no, you did the right thing. This covenant should be announced to all the people of the city in the form of a decree, to avoid unnecessary casualties in the desert in the future. I was just thinking about the oath made by the Scorpion King and Allah. That young man is not simple. You have become a supreme mage, and I am afraid his achievements are no less than yours. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.